Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the Cyber Innovators Challenge virtual pitch event. My name is Megan Saunders, and I am the Challenge Program Manager here at the National Security Innovation Network, or NSIN, and we are running this challenge in collaboration with the Department of Defense University Consortium for Cybersecurity, or UC2. This event aims at identifying cutting-edge solutions to address critical cyber threats and challenges faced by the Department of Defense. Today, we have 15 teams pitching solutions to win a portion of a $1 million prize pool. Thank you for being here, and I would like to welcome one of our partners, the Director of UC2, Dr. Gwyneth Sutherland, for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Megan. I am so delighted to be partnering with NSIN for the Cyber Innovators Challenge. This is the first time we've partnered, and it has been amazing. We have seen such great finalists come forward for this pitch event, and we really look forward to seeing what they bring for us. The University Consortium for Cybersecurity, UC2, is meant to be a focal point, a hub between the Defense Department, our government stakeholders, and academia. We aim to increase communication, collaboration, and access through cybersecurity research. And working with NSIN has been exactly what we had hoped for and bringing forward all of our mission goals. We have with us today some of our stakeholders who will be benefiting from some of this research, and we look forward to further supporting this in potentially some follow-on actions. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Megan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sutherland. Next, I would like to welcome Colonel Raul Rodriguez, the Director of Academic Engagements at US Cybercon.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Raul Rodriguez, Colonel of the United States Army, and with me today is Master Sergeant Cottrell Bishop. On behalf of General Hawk and Rear Admiral Lennox, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to do some very important work in support of both UC2 and US Cyber Command. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to let you all know or give you an update on the Office of Academic Engagement. As you may or may not know, we are having a faculty workshop. If you are part of our 129 schools in the Academic Engagement Network, you would have received an invitation to our faculty workshop, which will be taking place at the University of Maryland School of Law, Carey School of Law, 6 and 7 August. What's important about this event is we're going to be identifying some of the gaps in Cybercom's command strategy. We're at the unclassified level. We're going to pass that information or the information that comes from our faculty workshop to our 129 schools and ask them to help us fill those gaps or identify ways that we can fill those gaps through the research, both at school and with the students. The work will be highlighted at our Cyber Recon event, Recon Research and Education Conference, which will take place at West Point Academy. Master Bishop will talk a little bit about that. The other thing I want to highlight is our Tech Talk. We have changed our format for our Tech Talks. We are going to do more of a TED Talk style program. Our first one will take place 12 September at the University of Purdue. We are also scheduling one at the University of Colorado State next semester, I believe maybe February timeframe, in which we'll have 4 to 5 presenters talk about topics of interest to both the school and the command. We will go to the school with the school's audience being students, faculty, staff, community leaders, private and public sector. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Master Sergeant Bishop.
Hello all, Master Sergeant Bishop here, US Cybercom Academic Engagements. Here to just give a brief overview of our upcoming events. As early as August, we'll be prepping for our Cyber Recon 25. This will be our 3rd iteration of this event, scheduled for 9 through 10 April, and will be held at the West Point Academy in upstate New York. We are expecting 12 to 15 teams to present their research topics at that event. Topics the information for those topics and the background will be identified at our August faculty workshop, as Colonel Rodriguez mentioned earlier. Following on from that will be in 2025, as early as January, we are expecting our first, well, one of our most recent scholar in residence participants. That will be Professor Gartsky. He hails from the University of California, San Diego, and his residency with us will span approximately 7 months, starting in January. And in doing so, he will be tasked with assisting Cybercom through some of their challenges and some of their problem sets over that time period. So really exciting times here at Cyber Command, and we're definitely looking forward to some more events like this, and for the coordination and cooperation from some of the shareholders here.
Yeah, and just real quick, if you're interested in participating in our Scholar in Resident program, following Professor Gartsky, the next one will start. We're expecting August-September timeframe of 2025, so be on the lookout for that. Subject to that, Megan, back to you.
Thank you both for the information and upcoming activities at Cybercom. Now we will turn it over into our pitch portion of today's event. As mentioned, we have 15 teams presenting today, and we will begin with our third topic area of data and permeability. Each team will have 10 minutes for their presentations and Q&A with the judging panel, followed by 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Up first, we have the University of Buffalo.
Hello, NSIN. I'm James Reganor, the co-founder and CEO of Veritex. Today, I'd like to talk to you about quantum solutions, specifically our product, Fortis Data Assurance. In the spring of 2022, the President released National Security Memorandums 8 and 10, which alerted us that our adversaries were using quantum tools to decrypt, but they were also employing a strategy of steal data now, decrypt later. So we developed Fortis Data Assurance. What is data assurance? Well, it's done at the asset level. We protect the data. We also look at quantum proofing the data against these future threats. We provide data provenance, and we provide tamper evidence. We think these are essential to operate in Web3 and Industry 4.0. You have to ask yourself these questions at your company. How do you know your data is not corrupted or manipulated? How do you know your data is not being weaponized? Can you trust your data in contested cyber environment of today? We developed a Fortis Data Assurance product so that we could look at data at rest. Using a hash function, we can tell if somebody's manipulated your data. We can look at data in transit and provide the security, provide tamper evidence, and finally provide provenance so that we know exactly the touches that have taken place on your data. Fortis complies with DoD strategies. In fact, the 2 most recent strategies come out, DoD Fulcrum strategy and the Air Force Zero Trust strategy, are perfectly aligned with our solution and what we're doing today. Veritex has put together this solution to enable small and medium-sized businesses to have the security and the data assurance that is often only afforded to the large OEMs. The benefits, well, we're going to allow you to keep your fluidity within your business. We're going to increase your security. We're going to help with the provenance, whether if it's compliance or regulatory issues. And again, we're going to help quantum proof your data so that you can be assured that the steal now and decrypt later phenomena isn't going to impact you. What data do you have that's going to be relevant in 5 or 10 years? This B-52 behind me, nobody thought it'd be flying today, but quite a bit of data is still relevant. How are we protecting that? We have some upcoming solutions in Fortis too. Patented, we have this XYZ random centroid to create geometric shapes that allows us to create infinite solutions potential of where that centroid is. So again, another confounding element to quantum proofing. And then we have a quantum proofing algorithm hopping solution that's kind of like a half-quick radio, that frequency hops, that allows you to, again, skip frequencies in a random fashion at a random time, and again, confound quantum. And then finally, we're integrating AI. Specifically, we've been talking to Watson. Today, we're able to do the data assurance solution. And as we go forward to the future, we're going to look at being able to simulate threats, being able to learn, create digital twins of the data, start looking for anomalies, and do quite a bit of learning so that we understand data at the asset level. There's a lot of cross-domain challenges, as you guys know, looking at how you move data. How do you move data to an unsecure party? How do you move data to a secure party? Email doesn't work. We know that's broken. So what we've created is a very deliberate method that has to be accepted with inflection points that we prevent you from consuming bad data if it's detected to have been manipulated at those inflection points. The first being acceptance and the next being prior to download. Infrastructure requirements are going to be minimal because this is a SaaS product. And again, it keeps the fluidity of your workflow and provides the digital asset with the security it needs. We can also use digital IDs to provide some anonymity to the parties. Lastly, we're working to reduce the threats, but learn about them as we use the AI on the generative multimodal AI model that we've created. And then finally, we're using data governance to help define who owns what portions of the data, how the metadata is treated, and so on. And then finally, the blockchain provenance will provide immutability for legal challenges or compliance audits. So we've got quite a bit going on, and really it's all about how do you enable the warfighter to be more lethal and to be more ready. So increased readiness and lethality. How do you allow an OEM to send a part like this directly forward, whether to a ship or a fob, and enable the warfighter to go out and fight? Data assurance is key to allowing the OEMs to do this. I'm Jim Reganor, the CEO and founder of Veritex, and I thank you for the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now go into our 5 minutes of judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My question is in reference to your cloud model. You say you have a SaaS solution. I was curious on interoperability with service providers, and then also if you have looked at the Federal Risk Assurance Management Program, or FedRAMP, and any compliance to support that program. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. As far as interoperability, we are actually interoperating right now cloud to cloud. We have an API call that leaves AWS, which is what we're live on, and goes over to the IBM cloud for an API for our quantum key distribution. But we are cloud agnostic. We can move cloud to cloud, or we can move blockchain to blockchain, or select the blockchain you have. Right now, we're using an Algorand blockchain, but we can use whatever the requirement is. In regards to FedRAMP, we've set ourselves up. We've not been funded. It's pretty expensive to do FedRAMP, nor do we have a program yet for ATO, but we've been told by the Air Force that we're going to be in the stack in 2025. So we're expecting to have a program or project that will allow us to get the ATO and FedRAMP. But we are doing everything we can now to prepare ourselves for that.
Thank you.
So I had a few questions. Thank you very much for that presentation. Who is on your team? Can you say a bit about the team members that are involved in providing this solution? And a related question, one of the things that we were looking for is your partnership engagement plan. So how do members of your team support both the solution that you've described and engagement with potential government stakeholders?
So thank you for your question. We are team-wise, we are a team of veterans primarily. So which is cool because we're trying to solve problems for DoD. So we are very aware of those head herders, so to speak. Within that team, we have some folks that are from UB. We actually participate with interns in UB, and we spend a lot of time engaging on the academic side by speaking in ComSci classes, using the ComSci teachers, and so on as we go forward. We also reside in a UB incubator. Our engagement outside of that is we've engaged on the SBIR. We've done several SBIRs and STTRs. So we've been able to engage our government customers that way. We participate in programs like this. And quite frankly, we're out speaking at every event that happens. And really, it's a good conversation now because this quantum thing, people have been kind of wondering, is there quantum, is there not? We're actually at a kind of a quantum phase point. So it is very, very important that we get this message out about quantum, about data assurance, and these sorts of things, and protecting data at the asset level. Beyond that, we have teammates we have a general counsel who's a former Marine. He engages on the legal use case for this. There are multiple use cases, as you can imagine, on data assurance. We just picked this one with additive manufacturing because that's the first one we've been funded by the government for. We have team members that have a background in many small businesses, entrepreneurial background, and team members that have a background in blockchain. We have development side team members that have developed multiple websites, SaaS products, that sort of thing. So we are doing pretty well. We also have a development team that we use on a sprint basis that interacts with our CTO in that piece there. So pretty robust team of veterans who understand what the problems are and really understand how to increase readiness and lethality for the warfighter. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of our job is here, right? Is to increase readiness and lethality.
Thank you. I had a second question. So you answered this a little bit, but if you were to identify a particular stakeholder that you were most interested in working with, if you were to sort of build out the solution further with UC2, who would that be and why?
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, that shareholder would be doing supply chain, whether it's DoD supply chain, but whether it's Air Force Sustainment Command or whether it's the Navy Materials Command, but working with them, because we think that it's very important, as I mentioned before, to be able to enable this part to get out to a ship or plane and use. What could happen? Someone could attack the data, or someone could attack the part. There are plenty of videos out right now where someone attacks a part, that part's put on a platform, that put, in case of a drone, it was a propeller, that propeller fails, the drone crashes. Think if that was an airplane or a submarine, if it was a valve on a nuclear submarine, it failed and we had a nuclear accident or so on. So really being able to provide that data assurance in the supply chain right now, we think is extremely important, because we think that that is going to be an attack vector in this great power competition of our enemy, the Chinese.
Thank you so much, Mr. Regner. We are at time.
Thank you.
We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Next up, we have the University of Colorado with Colorado Springs.
Good afternoon. My name is Shouhuai Xu, professor from University of Colorado Springs. The title of my PhD is MDR, a high-fidelity multi-domain range infrastructure for conducting cyber wargaming and generating data. This is a brief overview of my pitch. This is my team. I want to highlight two of my outstanding PhD students, Lieutenant Colonel Ear and Antonia Pfeffer. So what's the problem? In 2020 DoD data strategy, it is declared that DoD is a data-centric organization. That means that data is a strategic asset. And we all know how difficult it is to get the data. Let me give you one example. 2 years ago, I had a project with the US Cyber Command mentors. They tried super hard to try to get us some data for doing research, and it couldn't happen. So the problem we are tackling here is how can we generate multi-domain cyber data for research and training and other purposes. And the data should be high fidelity, scalable, replayable, and able to cross classification boundaries. Solution overview. In the middle of the picture, you see multi-domain range. Right now, it has 4 domains: cyber, land, air, and space. In cyber domain, we have our cyber range for IT infrastructures and our polypod cluster being conceived. In the land, we have access to Air Force Academy, Smart City, and we are also conceiving our own OT infrastructure. In the air domain, we already had our UAVs. In the space domain, we already built with our own CubeSats. On the left, you see scenarios. We're gonna design real-world cyber wargaming scenarios driven by cyber threat intelligence. We're gonna conduct the cyber wargaming scenarios in our infrastructure to generate the data. Because our infrastructure is a small scale, we're gonna further leverage generative AI to generate bigger data corresponding to what would be connected at a much bigger infrastructure. Our solution has 3 tasks which will be accomplished within 12 months. Task 1 is to refine our design of the infrastructure. Task 2 is to design scenarios. Task 3 is to conduct wargaming, connect the data, and generate bigger data. Unique selling point. You got our strategic commitment to this project. We envision that the outcome and the infrastructure will be useful to DoD, especially U.S. Space Command and Space Force in our backyard. They can leverage them for their purpose and train guardians. And right now, the infrastructure has 4 domains: cyber, land, air, and space. We will investigate how to extend it to incorporate the C domain. Impact. This is the first multi-domain range to our knowledge in the public sector, and it will play a critical role in educating our next generation scientists and operators to achieve supremacy in joint all-domain operation. Let's also hear what Lieutenant Colonel Year said about the impact.
Having recently served in U.S. Space Command's Joint Cyber Center, I can attest to the need for greater quantities of high fidelity and useful data, especially in the highly compartmentalized and classified space domain. In my next role as director of the Army's Regional Cyber Center in the Pacific, I also see great value in employing this solution to directly enhance the education and training of the Cyber Center's defensive cyberspace operators and cyber threat intelligence analysts by providing much needed quality data. Having recently
Proof of concept. We already had a CRADA with the Air Force Academy for using their smart city. We already built our space range, our cyber range, and already had our UAVs. We are conserving our OT testbed and our honeypot cluster. Partner engagement plan. We already identified multiple DoD partners who are extremely excited, like us, about the project, including Lieutenant Colonel Hancock, Dr. Pendleton, and the Chief Warrant Officer 3 James Turner from Army Cyber Institute. I hope you are convinced that MDR is a great solution to the problem, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now head into our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Michael Love, National Defense University. My question, sir, is in your proposal, you mentioned a risk of, based on the scope of your research here. I was wondering if you could address, how you would plan to address, just the sheer scope of what you're trying to undertake and how that could be, you may have to, if you had to adjust the scope. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon. I just want to get a clarification. When you say scope, it means the scope of the multi-domain range, right?
That's correct. Yeah, as you address, land, air, sea, space, and cyberspace, I could see where this would have a potential to be very large in nature and could be difficult to manage. So if you had to prioritize or adjust scope incrementally until you could get to like a full operating capability, just curious how you could address that. Thank you.
Questions. Thank you. Yeah, this has been something I've given the thought a lot. So we are prioritizing cyber range because that's where we are most kind of our comfort zone, and we already spend the 160K in hardware. The hardware already in the machine room, and then the space range is already built. So cyber range, number one priority, at least that's a baseline. I know I can do wonderful things. And then space range, I already have my CubeSats and the 4 segments already set up in my lab. And then the next priority will be the UAV. I already have UAVs. However, connecting UAVs to make it work with my space segment, that's gonna be challenging for sure. So the easiest part, once the easiest part is the relatively easiest part, is to work with the USAFA on their smart city. So we already had the SCADA, but we also need to be extremely careful. So we are working with them to identify, because we do not want our research data generation tasks mess up with their education. That's their number one mission. So, but number one, cyber range, they certainly it's already kind of partly working, and number two is the space range. Number three is the UAV and the OT. I'm conceiving. I ask students to give me specification. I already satellite my other kind of funding source for hardware. It's about 100K to 150K. So it's for buying whatever hardware is necessary to build. And I totally agree with you. This is super challenging. But it's super exciting. That's why I have DoD collaborators, because I want them to tell exactly what they want, as clear as possible, and we work together so that they can give us some specification. So I want to invite Lieutenant Colonel Year to have his perspective on this.
Yeah, I would just add also that we have over a dozen students in the lab who are really interested, a group interested in the UAV section, a large group including Viceroy fellows, undergraduates who are also in the grind of getting into the Linux kernel and getting that implementation up. And so part of the ability to keep us in scope is that we have different teams that are working on each part of the MDR. And also we are incrementally increasing the capabilities of each component of the MDR. So we started with 2 CubeSats, and then from USAFA, we're adding another CubeSat, and we're adding a digital from USAFA as well. And so the incremental method will also help us to maintain scope, and of course using automation tools and solutions like Ansible, Terraform, to especially for the IT network, will help us to maintain scalability as well. Thank you.
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, so I have a question also. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation and responses. If you were to realize this, again, I think very ambitious, Dr. Love captured very ambitious but very important type of project. One of the inherent aspects of it, I think, that you've already identified is that if you believe this is a novel solution and that it doesn't exist within academia, then what is your plan to make sure that other people know about it and that it can get used either within academia and the research community, or on conversely the other community across other stakeholders in the DoD besides the few that you've identified? If our hypothesis is to data being shared and you create this, how are you going to share it out? How are you going to make people know they can use this for research? And you have 2 seconds to answer.
We're going to have like academic channels to disseminate what we have. And the good thing for that, because the data is generated in like an emulated environment. So I suspect that the barrier for data sharing will be the threshold will be much lower, hopefully. But certainly I'm going to work with our UCC's relevant office to figure this out. But I think this is much more doable than we are sharing even anonymized real world data.
And I would just add really quick, just really quick, that we also will open source our solution as well, so that other universities, and if you want to push it up to the classified networks as well, to be able to execute some of these simulations and emulations.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. The last presenter for topic area 3 is University of Maryland Global Campus.
Oh, so yeah, thanks for this opportunity to present. So the solution which we proposing is a cutting edge solution, which is basically going to be addressing cyber threats, which are very common and very rampant. So as an introduction, because of the uprising in cyber threats, there is always increasing need on how to be able to resolve some of these uprising issues. So the solution which we are looking at is basically taking advantage of the opportunities that we have with the cloud space, using some of the different cloud technologies and how we can be able to emulate a real test environment and then funnel traffic into that environment. And then through a defensive measure or through defensive security, we are able to come up with modalities on how these cloud environments can be able to have appropriate solutions and remediations that can be proposed to fixing some of these cyber attacks. So ever increasing problems with all the multitude of problems that we have, different cyber scenarios. So we are basing on that, and we're trying to use all different possibilities on how different attacks scenarios can be generated, and then based on our vulnerability report, we'll be able to approach the solutions to that. So our proposed solution is much easier if you look at it from the picture view. So the proposed solution has, first of all, a synthetic threat emulation. Synthetic threat emulation has to deal with building a test environment. Our goal is to be able to set up a test environment in AWS Cloud. That test environment will be able to direct traffic from different sources. Traffic from different sources would basically generate different attack scenarios. And then we'll be leveraging AWS securities and other security modalities to simulate different test cases. The objective is once we have the different test cases that have been simulated, then we'll be able to come out with recommendations or remediations based on some of those specific cases. The second step talks about data immunization. The data immunization really is about the protective data, because with this solution in place, our idea is to be able to get some of this data so it can be disseminated in a secured way, so that based on the different solutions that we provide, this data can really go a long way to justify that. So for the data protection aspect of it, we are using services like the AWS Macy, which protects every PII data, and also encryption, different kinds of encryption that AWS suggests is through the AWS encryption services, to ensure that data is safely transported from one spot to the other. Data storage is really going to be in S3. So all the different test scenarios that we'll be able to run will store their respective data in S3 and then use that for further simulations. The flexibility and repeatness, just like I mentioned, we'll be able to repeat the process over with the different data sets that we are going to collect. And then for the safe data, as I also mentioned, PII data will be safely managed through Amazon Macy and other services. And of course, that will lead to overall improvements. So all of these different stages of the phases for the project will be broken into several months. First of all, building the test environment is one of the ideal cases where in it we'll be able to use different cloud technologies. So leveraging things like building AWS infrastructure using services like Terraform, which is cloud automation. So designing and coming out with a segregated network and ensuring that we can directly funnel traffic into that segregated network. And then once that is done, then we can now start carrying out our different simulation cases. So that will be the first phase. And once that has been accomplished, then we'll be able to now funnel data, generate the different test scenarios, come out with the different reports, store that data, and continue to rerun the process. So the implementation plan, just like I mentioned, is all centered around the same approach which I've mentioned. So it's all about going through these different phases and ensuring that at every different stage we have respective milestones based on what our expectations are. Technical capabilities and innovation. So with the uprising cloud technologies, we'll be looking at all different integrations, so integrations of different technologies to be able to enhance the process and see how we can be able to effectively remediate whatever vulnerabilities that we come across. And lastly, in conclusion, after all this is being carried out, it's our objective to be able to have a security document which will be shared across. This security document basically will be based on different test cases or different scenarios, and each of these scenarios will be providing remediations or defensive mechanisms on how some of these cloud and how some of these general vulnerabilities can be addressed. So with that in mind, our goal is to ensure that this information and this data that justifies the process can be used as evidence, proving to the fact that once all of this is being effectively utilized, then we can build modules and build different enhanced encryption mechanisms to be able to safely protect and fight against some of our cyber attacks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Desmond. We will now turn it over to our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead with questions.
Hi, good afternoon, Desmond. Mike Love, National Defense University. My question for you is in terms of your goals of the project.
Yeah.
Could you address, the focus where you're most interested in are you looking more at emerging threats, i.e. like 0 days, or are you looking more long-term systemic risks or threats to networks that would take longer, to go through? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So looking at threats mainly around the different networks, it's one of the things that we're planning to achieve. And based on that, every traffic that will be directed towards this test environment, essentially, our goal is to be able to identify what are the different vulnerabilities that this is going to cause. So it's more like an attack scenario that we are building. So we'll have a real life environment established, and then traffic comes in. And once we receive the traffic, our goal is in the long term, determine the patterns on how some of these vulnerabilities usually appear. And how do we have defensive mechanisms against them? That way we can be able to, in the future, once we already understand some of the patterns, and that's why we are storing some of this data and running multiple scenarios. So with those patterns, we can be able to come up with predictions and subsequently identify those threats and the possible defensive mechanisms that can be able to fight against them.
So just to summarize,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's more long-term or systemic, looking at the networks versus, something that's just emerging today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. In the proposed solution, you talk about protecting privacy. What is your actual plan there? Because it's specifically about trying to get a lot of data when you just mask some individual attribute.
Mm-hmm.
The other attributes could better show off the actual. There's a high correlation in the data. So what is your plan for actually protecting the privacy?
Yeah, so protecting the privacy, once we have the test environment set up, then we'll be able to enable the AWS, the Amazon Macy service. And basically the way the Macy service works is that it goes through our entire data sets. That's what we have stored in S3, our S3 buckets. And then it filters out every PII data. Once it filters out every PII data, it automatically encrypts that data. So with that, we have a highly secure PII data that can only be accessed via being decrypted.
Okay. So your solution is you're going to use the Amazon tools for protection.
Yeah, the Amazon Macy. Yeah.
So thank you very much for that presentation and your responses. I had a question about your team members and their expertise and contributing to the execution of your solution and the milestones here. Can you talk a little bit about your team and their expertise, and also how you would be able to partner and communicate and collaborate this solution with a potential DoD stakeholder? Thank you.
All right, sure. So when it comes to the team organization and functioning, so our different areas of expertise include cloud technologies, software development, and also DevOps. So with all the different cutting edge technologies, our goal is to be able to bring all these folks on board with the ability to relatively come up with innovative solutions. So if I take, for example, our cloud environment basically is going to be set up through an automation tool, which is Terraform. So that way we can relatively destroy the test environment and rebuild it on different scenario cases. So we have team members who have expertise in areas solely related to that, and their contribution will mostly be working in collaboration with each other. We also have container-based environments like scenarios where we'll be launching applications on the EKS, that's Elastic Kubernetes Service. So we have team members who have expertise in that. So, and then for the software development side, all the different the test scenarios that we'll be using, for example, build a real-life environment where we have an application running and what are the possible ways of vulnerable attacks. So software development, team member with a software development background will be able to build some of these applications, containerize these applications, and then we host them on our container-based environments, because what we plan to do is basically a microservice environment, so we can really generate so many test cases. Yep.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into a quick 5-minute break and meet back here at 1 o'clock to resume our presentations. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Next, we'll shift our focus to topic area 1, modeling and predictive analysis. First up is the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
Hi, we're Provenance Security. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today about how we'll be revolutionizing threat detection for enterprise security. In the first half of 2024 alone, there have been almost 3,000 publicly disclosed data breaches. Despite advances in cybersecurity tooling, successful attacks are at an all-time high. The root cause lies in how we store and analyze log data. Modern EDRs and SIMs use a linear sequential format to collect information. This format misses the cause and effect relationships between events, which are essential for contextual analysis. Consequently, detection systems rely on isolated rule-based analytics, causing a flood of false alarms. Cybersecurity analysts are overwhelmed, spending countless hours sifting through false positives to identify the genuine threats. Solving this issue requires reformulating the problem. Data provenance analysis achieves this by explicitly maintaining the causal relationships between events in a graphical format. This approach allows for a more sophisticated analysis of user behavior, but despite its potential, industry adoption of provenance has been limited. The primary challenge is the significant computational and storage overheads required to analyze and utilize this data format, making it impractical for widespread use until now.
ORCID changes all of that. ORCID is the first of its kind provenance-based intrusion detection system that can effectively scale to the requirements of an enterprise ecosystem. Current provenance-based systems analyze an explicit representation of a provenance graph, which is computationally and temporally costly. ORCID fundamentally changes how events are processed using a novel embedding algorithm to implicitly capture causal relationships. This makes ORCID the only provenance-based operating system operating in real time with minimal computational overhead. Through several studies, we have shown that ORCID is a significant improvement in performance over current commercial systems. While existing systems struggle to detect parts of the attack chain, ORCID can identify all malicious behavior while raising little to no false alarms. Moreover, because ORCID maintains causal relationships, it can recreate the entire attack chain for each alert. As a result, analysts can boil down their investigations from a series of queries to a single push of the button. Finally, ORCID enables more efficient log storage. Rather than using time as a metric, ORCID can identify important causal links, allowing for smarter log retention policies to store pertinent logs for longer periods. As the only graphical-based intrusion detection system on the market, we have shown that ORCID brings multiple advantages over existing solutions. It can help analysts reduce their investigation time to 1/10 of its previous occurrence, cut the number of false alarms by 95%, and retain pertinent log events for an additional 9 months for later incident response. With ORCID, enterprises can have a significant gain in cybersecurity robustness with minimal overhead to their security analysts.
We've already partnered with several organizations within the DoD's mission scope to help stress test ORCID's capabilities, and we can take those experiences to working with the DoD. ORCID can support the DoD's Chief Information Officer's work in improving enterprise-wide security by monitoring the department's endpoint and network capabilities and improving interoperability between those capabilities. We'll work closely with the DoD on their Cyber Operational Readiness Assessment Program and support the Cyber Mission Force's Cyber Protection Team. From work with our design partners, we've ensured that ORCID can be easily integrated into their existing security pipeline, no rip and replace. Using captured log data and alarms generated from current systems, ORCID can play an important role after the SIM, helping security analysts at both Tier 1 and Tier 2. ORCID can also integrate with current SOAR products, using its generated attack chains to automatically create SOAR playbooks for automated responses. From our design partners, we see that analysts can become 3 to 5 times more efficient with ORCID integrated into their intrusion detection pipeline, allowing them to focus on critical security tasks.
While ORCID is constantly under development, we have a proof of concept that we have been using to test with the design partners. In addition, we have worked with design consultants to create a front end that is familiar to threat analysts, easy to use, and optimized for the workflow. We expect to have a downloadable demo open to the public by the end of the summer, allowing security analysts to test parts of ORCID within their own environment. Our team is best positioned to tackle this problem, as this has been the focus of our research for the last 5+ years. Along with publishing numerous papers on the topic, we've participated in several different accelerators and competitions, allowing us to talk to more than 150 customers and validate this problem as the industry faces. We're working with several advisors with extensive previous experience in cybersecurity who believe in this product and our team. There's no one better positioned to make provenance-based security a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now head into our 5 minutes of judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll ask the first question from the judges. Interesting talk. What work do you actually need to do at this point? Because it seems like you have done a lot of development already.
Right. So that's a great question. While our product is probably the fastest provenance-based solution currently, there is still some work to be done on getting this product to the place where it can compete against existing EDR solutions. So there needs to be a lot of work done in terms of speeding up our core algorithm. It's not that's not possible, but just work needs to be done to make that happen.
Dr. Love, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. My question is relates to identity and access management. I was curious if how much you have done testing, in particular with DoD and federal multi-factor authentication, and what you've seen in terms of any challenges for interoperability in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, I know identity and access management, another of the key emerging technologies in the security space right now. Our solution is orthogonal and also synergistic with IAM solutions. We are within these graphical relationships within the system. We're representing who users are, who they authenticated as, and what they're doing. And so one of the things our algorithm is able to do is identify when users are doing something that are surprising or out of the ordinary with much higher precision than current threat detection systems.
I'll follow up with a second quick question. Just in terms of how your application works, does it require any specific like elevated permissions for the network?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we sort of see ourselves in the SIM and source space where we're at the orchestration layer. So we can actually take any event telemetry stream from existing products, be they commercial solutions like CrowdStrike or bespoke solutions running within the DoD. As long as we have that event telemetry stream, we're able to take existing alerts, tell you whether they're true alerts or false alerts. We're able to make original detections and automate the investigation of any incident.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation and responses to the questions. I had a question about the way that you have shown some of your, what you called, I think, working with a design team. You have a user interface that you said you've tested, I believe, with some of our potential stakeholders, that so that it looks like an interface that they're used to, et cetera. Can you talk a little about the team involved in helping translate or transfer what you've developed into the workspace? Any training, any other things that go along with that? And part of that process of creating this solution?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we've been working with several, as you said, several design partners. One of them being Sandia, and some of that work has been around, the human factor side of things. So how do you take your current, dashboard, and does it make sense to the analysts who are looking at it? So part of that research is involved in, the training, and how do you get, someone up to speed with detection and getting, better analysts, or getting someone to be a better analyst in a small amount of time. To answer that question a little more briefly, our product, what we're proposing would really shorten it down, because we are, it's very intuitive to use the solution. So Provenance makes it very easy to visualize what's going on. So it reduces the gap that is required to use current products.
Okay, as a follow-up to that, you have, I think that's a really excellent way to put it, that it's very easy to use in that way. So would you foresee in the future this is something that government and DoD stakeholders who have certain security issues and certain data provenance issues could also then work out with private sector or academia who have a different set of issues, and they need to collaborate essentially on the same security topic? Would they have different interfaces, or how do you see them working together? You have like 10 seconds because I went over.
Yeah. In terms of the front end, we have a chicken egg problem because we plug into existing products. We need our first customers, be them DoD or otherwise, to know what their needs are. But yeah, those plugins can definitely integrate in things that would enable, public-private or academic military cooperation.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Next up, we have our team from Marshall University.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Alexander Lambert. I'm a graduate research assistant at Marshall University, and I'm presenting on behalf of Marshall University's Institute of Cybersecurity and my fellow collaborators Noah Questenberry, Austin Woodrum, and Dr. Paula Swajidi. I've been working with industrial control system security and object detection, as well as image recognition at Marshall University. Other members of our team have experience with digital forensics and incident response, system administration, intrusion detection, and secure software engineering. And today, we're proposing a solution for determining sentiment sway using disinformation actor identification techniques in sentiment analysis. So previous research shows that negative campaigns by disinformation actors exist on unregulated social media. So this is like X, formerly known as Twitter. And that is a known threat. But there are limited studies on the effectiveness of disinformation campaigns on real people. So our plan is to develop a method to analyze sentiment of legitimate users interacting with disinformation over time. This way, we can quantify the effectiveness of successful tactics used by adversaries to manipulate public sentiment. This will enhance our understanding of public susceptibility to disinformation campaigns, and we can use our new understanding to strengthen societal resilience and cybersecurity against disinformation threats. So, some key features. Sentiment change of legitimate users interacting with disinformation campaigns over time is a key feature of this. Over time is the important bit. So quantifying the effectiveness of this, we can use sentiment analysis, and we can use the findings to understand and counter disinformation by informing policy responses and conducting educational initiatives to reduce the impact of disinformation on the public. So this is essentially how the process will work. First, we have disinformation campaigns. We're going to leverage previous research's methods to identify disinformation campaigns. So for example, bot detection strategies for simple bots, we can use clustering to identify retweet networks. This is done by bots to amplify messages. They retweet messages they want to amplify. We can observe similarities between original content posted by accounts. So bot accounts will post the same URL for fake news, or they'll repeat the same text over and over to amplify messages again. More sophisticated attacks for disinformation would be trolls and content polluters, as these are real people, or more sophisticated bots, maybe leveraging ChatGPT. So we can leverage previous research on post frequency of these groups to identify them. Previous research to identify these groups. We're going to cluster these groups by their interactions. So they'll reply and retweet and quote tweet disinformation. And we can identify communities by putting center points. So there'll be hashtags and keywords used during these events. So we'll have all these different groups of users, and we're going to apply sentiment analysis on them. If it changes over time, their sentiment towards these events, then the disinformation campaign is successful. If it doesn't, then it's unsuccessful. So the uniqueness of this, sentiment analysis is common, and especially in social media, as well as data collection of social media and identifying disinformation campaigns. This has been done in previous research. The unique aspect of ours is doing it on a targeted group of people, legitimate users, over a period of time. Now, we can do this research and development to understand the tactics used by adversaries to manipulate public sentiment, develop tactics to counter this disinformation campaigns, and utilize artificial intelligence or machine learning techniques to reduce the turnaround time for developing solutions. And the way we can develop these solutions at the Marshall University Institute for Cybersecurity. So the Marshall University Institute of Cybersecurity is a platform for researchers, Department of Defense members, and industry experts to discuss cybersecurity. We have a current partnership with Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network, and this establishes the National Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity and addresses the U.S. Cyber Command's challenge problem set, this one being specifically modeling and predictive analytics. We can connect the Institute of Cybersecurity with U.S. Cyber Command's academic engagement network. We're also developing a workforce for cybersecurity professionals in the Appalachian region, specifically West Virginia, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And we're also in partnership with West Virginia University, West Virginia State University to enhance cybersecurity education and talent recruitment. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now head into our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'll ask the obvious question. I think here is in terms of using live human subjects for your research, could you address institutional review boards or IRB concerns for this research? Thank you.
So the IRB, well, the Marshall University have our IRB, unit that will review all of this. We have not to that point of researching on the human, the user itself. We're still in the stage of collecting the data, information, and then defining our sentiment analysis.
Okay, I guess as a quick follow-up though, this is something that you would intend to do though, prior to moving forward with your test audiences? Or
right, that's definitely, we'll have to get an IRB approval before going forward. At this point, we have not involved anybody outside, our research group.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
I have a question here. The basic premise, the thing that will cause an alert is that you'll see a shift in sentiment analysis of people's posts, correct? How do you deal with two things that I'm wondering how you deal with? How do you deal with a seismic event which will significantly change people's opinions? Think 9/11, for example. Opinions were very different on 9/10 versus 9/12. Or how do you deal with disinformation campaigns which our goal is to reinforce people to stay in their opinions?
That's a very good question. One of the things that we look into is not only that we want to make sure, things like that are major, of course, are going to cause some issues, in our analysis. One of the things that we saw, for example, in 2020, there's a bunch of people burning 5G towers. And that's completely unpredictable because it's just, it's disinformation completely. So things that are, in large scale, we'll see a spike in our sentiment analysis. And that's where, even though, we haven't got to that point yet, but, having the AI to kind of be able to see what is, what's the outside information, the outliers that are out there, so we can also take that into consideration.
And the part about reinforcing people's opinions of themselves or of the world?
To be honest, we haven't got into that, thinking about that much. And the idea is to make sure it's a disinformation campaign. I guess from your point of view of your question, what if it's not necessarily disinformation? It's just to reinforce your personal views in a sense, right?
Yeah, and the idea that I'm misinformed already, and I'm just getting more and more evidence to say I still support this, 5G reception inside of COVID vaccines, for example.
Right, exactly. That's very good.
Yeah, but I guess then we would have to ask: are they being provided with this information to reinforce these beliefs? That would definitely be something we would have to detect with the system.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for this interesting presentation. I had a couple of questions following on from my colleagues. You identify in the presentation a unit of analysis as the public, and you also talk about a target group. Can you say a little bit more about who this is and who public is? I'm inferring from some of your other presentation materials that this would be English-speaking data?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Can you narrow it and tell us a little more about who you're looking at specifically? Or are you looking at public, and what does that mean?
So specific to Marshall, in our relationship with JFHU Doden, we're sort of being tasked to look into the realm of industrial control system, which is how we found out about the 4G tower burning and 5G. That's an industrial control system, some critical infrastructure that could be affected by disinformation. So that's our number one scope. So we don't have a specific geographical, location or a user, but it's anybody that would be influenced by a critical infrastructure, disrupting anything that could, involve that industrial control system.
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So you have not narrowed your target group down yet. Have you, when you talk about the approach that you're taking in some of the earlier research that you've done, can you talk about any other disciplines that you bring in to consider this as well from the technical disciplines that you have described that might also help you work with potential DoD stakeholder partners? Can you talk about your team more, please? Thank you.
Sure. So we have a partnership. So this is not they're not on the team, but we have a group of political science faculty members that are also looking into this for the sentiment analysis aspect of that. So we're looking at the social aspect. Of course, within the scope right now, will be English speaking, because it's critical infrastructure in the United States is what we're looking. So it'll be an English speaking group. All the disinformation network will be in English. We're not looking into anything outside of that. So that's the main thing, the group that we're collaborating right now. JFHU Doden also provide us, as part of the Cyber Command challenge, would be to see how the attempt to steer that sentiment and, of course, their ability to succeed. So that's the main thing that we're looking at this project is, was it successful or not? If it's, and then within the scope of a critical infrastructure, because that's one of the biggest scare right now.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Now let's shift our focus to the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory's presentation.
Hello, my name is Michael Gabay. I'm with the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory. I'd like to thank the challenge organizers for giving me the opportunity to present here today. I'll be talking about an idea for modeling how influence campaigns affect leadership networks. As far as my background, I'm a physicist with expertise in modeling social and political dynamics for national security applications. I've led teams consisting of both computational and social scientists, and I've worked with both the DoD and the IC. I have a TS clearance, and APL is a UARC and has the ability to handle classified information. It also has great software engineers. The basic problem I'm addressing is the U.S. ability to sway security policy decisions by foreign governments, particularly our allies and partners, via influence campaigns. As leadership elites are the ultimate policymakers, influence campaigns must be designed that are capable of persuading those elites. However, most of the research and models on influence campaigns are oriented towards the public. And the public often pays little attention to foreign policy issues. So that speaks to the need of specifically modeling elites. As effective message framing is essential to the success of an influence campaign, we need to understand how different frames impact individual elites and group decisions. So my proposed solution is a prototype software that I developed called Portend, which models how framing and group dynamics affect elite policy positions, where frames are the fundamental value dimensions by which the desirability of a policy is evaluated. Portend can model the simultaneous framing competition among rival external sources, such as the US, China, and Russia, not just each source in isolation. This is the Portend pipeline. There's a lot here, but essentially subject matter experts complete surveys, which can then be sent for structural analysis, source influence modeling, and social influence modeling. The primary advantage of Portend is that it provides a comprehensive tool for modeling the effects of message framing on leadership elites. It can model how external source framing interacts with group dynamics. Besides modeling the direct effect of framing on an elite actor's policy preference, it can also model indirect effects via influence campaigns targeted at elite actors' constituency blocks. And it can yield insight into both group and individual level outcomes. We've done a few demonstrations of applying Portend to influence campaigns. The historical case of the Russian-Turkish crisis was a tremendously successful influence campaign in which Austria and Britain were able to persuade Tsar Alexander not to go to war against the Turks, thereby thwarting the longtime Russian dream of getting a foothold on the Mediterranean. And Portend correctly identified the frames that they needed to use to do that. But we've also conducted a couple of modern applications with respect to security cooperation with both the Philippines and India. The proposed R&D in the effort has three main components: extending the modeling capabilities of Portend, diversifying and improving the data sources, and straight up software improvement as well. The partner engagement plan is a critical part of the effort. The Joint Warfare Analysis Center will be a main partner. I trained JWAC personnel on Portend back in May, and I'll consult on case applications with them and get input from them regarding model development and software refinement. I'll also collaborate with JWAC to facilitate the participation of SMEs from other government organizations. And the Air Force Research Laboratory will be another partner, and I'll collaborate with AFRL to specifically tailor Portend to IO specialists. Successful implementation of this idea will enable IO planners to design more effective influence campaigns for swaying the security policy decisions of foreign governments. And here are some applications as to how Portend can give insight into both policy and group outcomes, such as influencing policy decisions, countering frames from rival external sources, identifying elite targets of influence or constituency blocks to target, shaping majority coalitions, isolating individual elites or factions, and creating group discord, or alternatively, preserving group stability. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now shift into our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Mike Love with National Defense University. My question is, actually I have two questions. The The first is in terms of the results of your research, how you plan to share those, if you've thought about that. And then secondly, as I looked at your partners, I really initially felt that this had a heavy diplomatic potential use cases, i.e. The UN or other international bodies. Was curious if you had looked into any diplomatic avenues for partner outreach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Michael. In terms of sharing the research, just more broadly, I do publish basic research and policy relevant research, and I have written up on Portend. But ultimately, I mean, this effort would be designed on getting a tool that DoD users can employ. Getting JWAC, which is kind of a high-level shop, they do very sophisticated analysis, up and running and improving the tool, and the AFRL effort is more oriented towards IO specialists and planners, and there the idea would be to make a guided flow path. And so I think it's sharing the tool, and maybe if that doesn't quite answer your question, please follow up with that. And about the diplomacy aspect, that's very much true, that there is this elite component, and some of the people who have the best knowledge of elites work in our embassies, right? And there is part of the partner engagement plan is trying to increase SME engagement from different organizations, which often is a problem, just bureaucratically to get them the time, right? And the more they see the value of the tool, I think the more they can be brought in as collaborators, I think the easier that will become.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for your response to our questions. I had a couple of questions. You mentioned that there were other SMEs that helped create this, and certainly would be inputting the initial information, which would then be analyzed and feed the tool. Can you talk a little bit more about that process and the different disciplines and backgrounds that contribute to this, and how you would communicate that expertise to the stakeholders so that they, in a way that builds trust in wanting to use the tool? Is there any sort of verification or way that they can understand where the information is coming from if it's packaged from a long report, essentially the way it was visualized there, into something that's more user interface friendly?
So ultimately, what the SMEs do for a given case is they are identified. They, let's say, have expertise on the country of concern, and we might talk to them about who the key elites are, identifying those folks, identifying the frames, and then a survey is created, and the survey is very systematic, right? And so it's not that they are giving a report; they are answering these surveys, which provide numerical estimates that are then used in the model. So that's how the SME process works. But we'd like to kind of make this more of a interactive and a living tool. So rather than just having the SMEs be at the front end and then people do IO somewhere else, we'd like to kind of bring the SMEs back into it, and doing some of this automated data and kind of updating the data, I think will help. And in terms of the social science background of the model, it comes from attitude theory, political framing theory, social influence theory, and foreign policy theories of decision making.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Next up, we have the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Hi, and welcome to our pitch, Active Defense with an Adversarial Mindset, or ADAM. With us today is Dr. Natalie Bolton and Dr. Vijay Anand. We are both associate professors from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. I am within the College of Education, and Dr. Anand is the Director of Cybersecurity within the Department of Information Systems and Technology. Today, our pitch is going to be focusing on developing a psychometric model for an adversarial mindset that maps to cybersecurity technical skills and competencies. Cyber is an area of study where the defender has to be aware of the adversary as they are making decisions. Our pitch focuses on training cyber defenders with prescriptive analytics ethically and legally. We hope to accomplish that with 4 different pitches to you. First will be a framework for defining the psychometric model to measure an adversarial mindset, mapping psychometrics to cyber skills and competencies, a platform for verifying and calibrating psychometric measures, and last, a framework for predictive and prescriptive analytics related to decision-making, learning modules, policies, and recommendations based off of current knowledge base, legal and ethical considerations. Now, Dr. Anand is going to go in depth with the psychometric model for an adversarial mindset.
Thanks, Natalie. Key feature of our model is the development of the psychometric model of an adversarial mindset. This psychometric model was developed during training and observing students and their performance in the collegiate cyber defense competition. The model identifies 3 phases. The first phase is the elastic recollection phase, where the cyber defender is faced with known threats and they rely on their skills and mitigation strategies to eliminate the threats. The second phase is the plastic phase, where the cyber defender faces unknown threats and they try all their known mitigation strategies. That leads to 2 options. If the cyber defender cannot progress beyond their known mitigation strategy, they reach a fracture point beyond which the threat persists, leading to stress buildup in the cyber defender. The other option is when the cyber defender gains critical insight and finds novel strategies to mitigate the threats. And we have quantified these phases with 4 metrics: the cyber elasticity, the cyber plasticity, the cyber fracture point, and cyber resilience. They are all based out of known threats, unknown detected threats, known mitigation, novel mitigation, stress, time, and organizational objectives. So we have few unique selling points. We have mapped our technical skills to psychometrics. We have created a new terminology to understand an adversarial mindset. We have a new set of metrics for psychology. We have created a survey module to calibrate the psychometrics of an adversarial mindset. And finally, we apply psychometrics to predictive and prescriptive analytics with legal frameworks, ethical reasoning, and known knowledge base to augment decision-making recommendation systems and development of high-level security policies and learning modules. This diagram actually gives an overview of the data-driven psychometric model for an adversary-aware active defense. There are 5 phases. The first phase is the pilot study, where we are calibrating the psychometric model with various assessment data. These assessment data are self, peer, formative, and benchmark data. The second phase is where we intend to use our findings for adversary detection by categorization of data from various data sources based on psychometrics. In the third phase, we apply predictive analytics to data categorization to identify potential upcoming threats by adversary identification. In the fourth phase, we apply prescriptive analytic techniques based on our psychometric model with legal, ethical reasoning, and known knowledge base. The final phase is where we identify defensive prescriptions for decision-making, recommendation systems, novel learning modules for workforce development, and high-level security policies.
So this slide shows our proof of concept to date. With our survey, we have developed 3 surveys for 3 different groups. We've got the blue teams that are serving as the defenders, the red team as the attackers. Our simulation is the National Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. We're using that as our test bed. We have tested both reliability with coefficient alphas and constructability with principal component factor analysis. Additionally, we'll be calibrating the survey data with other assessment data that's produced in the simulation. And last, we have our potential applications and impact of solution. So curricular and training will be a key outcome of how we can use the data. And I'll let Vijay wrap us up with the last impacts.
We have some prescriptive decision making modules that we identify proactive security solutions. We have some recommendation systems to strengthen the cybersecurity workforce. Recommend strategic cyber defense maneuvers. We intend to create some security policies for proactive cyber defense and inform future cyber defense simulations like this collegiate cyber defense competition.
Thank you.
That's where our presentation ends. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now head into our 5 minutes of Q&A with the judges. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon.
Go ahead,
Go
Michael.
ahead.
One question. You're using the collegiate competition data set. Is there evidence right now that says that's reflective, that data set was reflective of cyber professionals?
Yes, the data set, when we have the collegiate cyber defense competition, every competition is based on well-known attacks in that year or recent years. And then the red team is actually composed of professionals who are directly working in companies as well as in some defense organizations as penetration testers as well as defenders. So they are well versed in the idea of what's going on in the field, and they also help us craft some of the competition goals and structures that we typically do. We do collaborate with the CCDC office heavily for this competition. We have asked them to give us feedback, as well as, since I'm also a CCDC director, I also have some say on what kind of competition is there and things like those. But yes, it is very reflective of what's going on in the real world. Any latest and greatest threat, we will be able to simulate that in the CCDC.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is in terms of the applicants or the audience that you're studying as compared to the results and the recommendations that you presented here. It seemed to me as if the analysis is very individualistic, based on individual skills of a threat hunter or an attacker or a defender. The recommendations seem to be a little more addressing classes of users or workers. I was wondering if you could help me understand that better. Is this more individual skills, or is this more longer term workforce writ large? Thank you.
So the goal of this psychometric data collection is to identify. So when they go to compete at CCDC, it is actually a group. There is a blue team which is competing against a red team. So the group is typically of 8 students, and we are trying to make the group better. So that is one of the goals, but the group can only be better if the individuals in the group become better. So we try to identify skills of that individual who knows a specific topic and try to identify how we can enhance their skills while they are enhancing the whole group performance. So when we do this as a competition, the competition is a collection of individual as well as a group. It is not primarily individual or primarily group. It is both. Both the things have to work for the team to be successful. And from my observation,
the teams with good individuals and good team building structures are the best suited to win such competitions. There might be great individuals in one team, but if they don't do the teamwork accurately, they don't really work well. They generally don't win the competition, but good individuals with good team dynamics actually wins the competition. And that's why CCDC becomes such a critical part for us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation and the responses. I had a question, two questions. One is at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned creating the solution within the ethical standards of research. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and how that applies to this particular solution in your estimation? And also, as you are working with partners, and you've already given us great details on the methodology with the students and so forth, how do you begin to understand other cultural perspectives that might be the behavioral psychometrics from the adversary to bring that into your work?
It's a great question. So I will try to be quick. One of the things for the cultural part is our teams are typically made out of multiple students from all over the world. So there is a lot of cultural already built into this survey. We actually know that most of the teams will have at least 30% of their students out of the US from some part of the world, and that's a good location for that. And then for the ethical part, just as an example, the defender can actually go and do some offensive attack on the red team, but we make sure that the rules of the defense are told to them previously, and they cannot break those rules. And then if they do, they get points docked out of their competition. So we definitely make sure that they don't do any unethical situation in the competition when we measure it.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Now let's shift our focus to the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Davis, and today we want to talk to you a little bit about the Misinformation Analysis Toolkit. So just a little background on our team. Like I said, I'm Jeremy. I've got a PhD in artificial intelligence, mostly work in NLP on open source intelligence data and data anomaly detection. Our co-PIs are Patrick Papin. He's our assistant director here at the University of Alabama Huntsville Center for Cybersecurity Research and Education. And he's done a lot of work with vulnerability assessment and threat modeling. Our another co-PI is our director, Dr. Tommy Morris, and he's done a lot of work in interpreting modeling results to understand impact on cyber activities. Then our last co-PI is Ms. Johnson, and her specialty is doing application of modeling to operational test decisions. So a big push in the last few years has been misinformation campaigns, and social media platforms allow these because they allow unrestricted information flow, which makes them a prime platform for launching mass misinformation campaigns. It also provides a vehicle to amplify these campaigns. And large language models, as everyone's heard of, have been a watershed moment for bringing AI to the general public. They're an invaluable tool for increasing productivity. But what we were discussing was, what if someone used large language models to detect, classify, summarize, and compute sentiment on these misinformation campaigns that you see pop up over social media? So that's the goal of our proposed project here, is a Misinformation Analysis Toolkit, or MAT. And it consists of two distinct component modules. The first is a social media module, and its sole purpose is to gather posts, reactions, likes, etc., from open source APIs that are publicly available to everyone. And we'll work with our DoD partner to establish the key concepts of interest. Or in other words, we'll work with our DoD partner to determine what topics they're interested in and determine what kind of data they want to gather and what they want to look at. The second component of this is the LLM processing module. And so we'll take our social media data that we gather, just doing like some some work with publicly available APIs, pass it into the model. And this model will perform several individual tasks that we'll talk about next. So the combination of the model's task outputs will be the overall system output. And here's just a general diagram of our proposed system here. So on the left, you can see our social media module, and this social media module will work with our DoD partner to gather feedback and gather input on what they care about, what they want to see. And then we have our LLM module here. So the LLM module is composed of several submodules, which will be the talk of the next, or the focus of the next few slides here. So you can see it has a gateway module that feeds an intent module, and an intent module feeds a summarization and sentiment module. And the summarization and sentiment modules feed into a report module. The report module is actually the final output of the system here. So what do these modules do? So the gateway module's sole task is to just monitor our incoming social media posts. And what it's going to do is it's going to flag posts when it thinks that they might be a part of a misinformation campaign. So to flag these posts, and all these posts that get flagged will be passed across to the intent classification module. So the intent classification module, like I said, will take these flagged posts as input. So the goal of the intent classification module is to determine the intent of the misinformation campaign. Is its purpose to sow discord, spread false information, anything like this? Another goal of the intent classification module that isn't listed here is to determine if it will be our final sanity check on whether or not the posts are part of a misinformation campaign. So anything that passes the intent classification module will be passed across to both the summarization and the sentiment module. So the summarization module, as you can see here, its focus is to summarize both the post and the reactions that get passed through the intent module. So what I mean by this, we'll summarize the actual original content, and we'll summarize all of the reactions to the original content. So your original post and your comments and your likes and all that good stuff there. So what the goal of this module will be to construct clear and concise summaries of the messaging campaign that's going on. Then we have our sentiment module, and the intent module feeds this module as well. So the first thing that it will do, it will ascertain the sentiment of the misinformation campaign itself, our targeted entities shown in positive, negative light. It will also ascertain the general sentiment of reactions. We'll use some statistical modeling techniques on likes and feedback to get that sentiment. And the final thing was ascertain the general sentiment of the engagements with the campaign. So we'll use some NLP techniques to compute the sentiment of the reactions or the comments or the interactions with the original post. And finally, we'll have a reporting module. And a reporting module will, like I said, will combine the outputs of the summarization and sentiment modules, and it'll provide these reports to the end user of the system. So for potential applications here, you can imagine that we can target hostile misinformation campaigns launched by nation states, those launched by foreign agitators, and we can monitor the launch and spread of misinformation in general. So for our partner engagement plan, we plan to have a strong focus on collaboration with our DoD partner with iterative development, recurring status meetings, cloud-based sharing to all documents and software hosted on UH's GitLab. We also have a Viceroy Outreach Workforce Development Program, which has a strong pool of students here, and that's in collaboration with the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now head into our Q&A with the judges. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, I'll go ahead. Just one quick question. In terms of your LLM or large language model, could you just discuss your intent in terms of, or capability with making, tuning or training the LLM over time based on the information that you get? Thank you.
Sure. So we've already got some works in place here at UAH on some different projects that we're working with large language models already. In particular, we're using Llama, Llama 3 being the latest that Meta's released. So what we're doing a lot of is RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So where you still keep the original context of the model, but you apply a different data set to it and let it learn from that. So we were kind of going to go down that road at first while we're gathering the information, because at first you won't know like what organizations are interested in what data. So as we get an idea of what organizations are interested in what type of data, then we can start to look at fine tuning on particular data sets or particular topics of interest. So yeah, it'll kind of be a multifaceted approach there with first RAG, and then as we gather enough data, we'll be able to fine tune and work our model that way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for your response to our questions. I wanted to know a little bit more about the data sets that you plan to use. I know that you have a slide that summarizes a couple common social media, and I didn't know whether that was what you were actually going after or a placeholder, or if you were looking at certain channels and by inference certain target audiences, and how you were approaching that, and what members of your team or potential members of your team were helping you understand that.
Yes, ma'am. So the social media module in particular will be our data set. So we won't really have a data set at first. We'll be gathering it. We'll gather feedback. We'll gather input from, let's say if we're working with Army and they care about specific topics, we'll use searches and web crawlers basically to get that information back from social media channels to actually curate a data set, and then we'll train on that data set. We have some capabilities with Dr. Pape and Dr. Morris for doing certain things like that. And I came from OSINT background, where we were actually doing a lot with Twitter and Facebook, a couple of dark web things to gather feedback, gather that information, gather all of that data, and then use that data to actually model and train with. Does that answer your question?
Mostly. So to say this back to you, you haven't quite identified it. It will be in partnership with your stakeholder, but
Yes,
it
ma'am.
could potentially be any of those. Do you foresee any barriers in getting some of this data?
Yeah, in particular, you have to have licenses for some. Facebook and Twitter, you have to have licenses for now. Twitter used to get or X now used to get the Firehose API, but you can't really get that anymore. They're real hesitant about working with certain organizations, but the last job that I was at, they were comfortable with working with DoD. So Twitter, Facebook could be a barrier. TikTok's actually wide open. And as for the dark web, if you can get there, you can just grab everything off of there, and that's kind of what we're planning to do there. If you can use some browsers, and actually a couple of companies that we would plan to partner with actually already do that, so we could probably leverage their resources to get the data that we need, since they already have all the licenses and infrastructure for that in place.
Okay, so that was the second part of my question, is you do have some partners that you're using to help you get the data and potentially identify which data sets outside of the DoD stakeholders. Can you say any more about those partners?
Yeah, it'll be Babel Street Incorporated. I still have that's the previous company that I worked at, and I still have a pretty good relationship with them. And we were actually talking about this, back and forth between University of Alabama Huntsville and Babel Street, and they have an education section that they'll provide licenses to universities and university attached research centers to allow them to use their software to pull their data. So that will be one partner that we have. And our DoD partner, we don't quite know yet. We do some work with Army, and we've got a couple of projects already in the pipe for Army. So just what the other half of that will be, whatever data they're interested in, is what we'll be trying to gather.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberation. Now let's turn our attention to our final presenter for this topic area, the University of Maryland START.
Good afternoon. My name is Timothy Clancy. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to be presenting on topic number 1, modeling and simulation, hacktivism as a social contagion. When we talk about hacktivism, we're talking about social activists who may embrace a template ideology. So, for example, in May, pro-Russian activists took it upon themselves to conduct a hacktivism attack, attacking Internet of Things through critical water infrastructure. That was a template method. Recently, pro-Palestinians, different template ideology. They used a denial of service against educational and financial sectors. These hacktivists largely targeting the main actors in conflict, but it's only a matter of time before it comes back to the US increasingly as generative AI also makes the ability of these hackers to get more sophisticated cyber tools more prevalent. So the solution overview, hacktivism is a form of social contagion, and social contagion spread by cultural scripts. These cultural scripts, they convey across social media, digital platforms, messaging apps. They convey a template ideology, the cause motivating the hack. They convey a template method, the modus operandi, attack the Internet of Things, do a denial of service. That's when it filters to a certain population that's at high risk. Self-similarity. Do I see myself in this cause? Do I support the grievance? Prestige and notoriety bias. Do I respect the source itself? Coherence. Can I understand what the scripts are telling me what to do? But when these hacks, they get media attention and the contagion can become self-sustaining. Now, our solution overview is we've done this work in social contagion, modeling for public mass killings and terrorism, and we want to modify our existing modeling and simulation capability to look at hacktivism. And, like I said, we come to this work with already done system structure. The upper right, that's a system structure of 20 years of expert theories on how radicalization spreads as a contagion. Then below, we took that system structure and simulated in a computer simulation using system dynamics. It's able to replicate contagion spread over 10 years, showing the waves of increases and decreases. Some of the competitive advantage, we aren't starting from scratch, and we're not making this up. So social contagion for cybersecurity may be a bit novel, but it opens up a whole new landscape of opportunities for countering hacktivist campaigns before they hit your servers, before they hit your infrastructure. You can stop them before they get to them. But the concept of social contagion itself is really well established. It comes off 4 decades of sociological research into celebrity suicide contagions. We've done 7 years now in terror contagions. I've listed some of our peer-reviewed publications. Proven M&S methodology. We use system dynamics. It took us years to build this, and we continue to publish and research. But because we already have this capability, we can bring it to you without having to start from scratch. Now, I work at START, the Terrorism Center at UMD. I also work with ARLIS. So we have access to a lot of partners, but we also working with MIT CAMS, who has offers to access to other partners. Now, I have about 15 years experience in national security and 30 years delivering technical programs. We're not coming at this alone. Because of the eligibility rules of the prize challenge, I have to apply by myself, but we've actually got an existing team. We've got KJ Oviette, she's our sociologist. We have Valeria Stevens of political science. We've co-authored some of these papers together. We've also worked on technical SBIR, competitive delivery, so we know how to work. To this, we're going to be joined by a cybersecurity expert, Dr. Xander Zalmeiker. He has a PhD in system dynamics. I have a PhD in system dynamics, so that's 2 PhDs in modeling and simulation. But he brings that domain expertise of cybersecurity to add to the existing team. But what does this all mean, right? What's the so what? Well, if you can detect at scale using algorithmic detection, you can detect these cultural contagions as they're happening. You can enable fast reaction times and prioritize resources as this is forming, cut the feedback loop, and keep it from escalating. Improve threat assessment, right? You can determine whether this is an organic hacktivist, like maybe pro-Palestinian has emerged organically, or may start as a state sponsor. We've already done the work to distinguish terrorism that comes from a state-sponsored versus organic. And all the normal M&S capabilities, predictive analytics, training aids, policy analysis, but you can also make a digital twin. You can replicate your environment in the simulation, allowing you to test policies in live time as the contagion is going on. We've already done this work for public mass killings. We've been able to replicate successfully. We have an approach that we've done this so we know what we're doing and can focus on making it explainable to partners, transparent ways they can understand, no black box algorithms. Part of that is building confidence into the solution. We developed the confidence building agreement using all the industry standard confidence measures. We've already met these. We've already matched these, but we can tailor it to any partner we work with. And we're approaching this as a whole of government. So again, our partnership list that we can reach out to, I work at START. I have access to RLS. Any classification issues we can obviously handle through that infrastructure. We're familiar with that, but we can access all the normal DoD, IC, and other partners. But through MIT CAMS, we can also access private sector, because these social contagions of hacktivism, they don't just target the DoD. As shown, the Russians attacked water infrastructure, the pro-Palestinian hacktivists attached to financial and educational services. This is a whole of society, and we can reach a whole of a society through our partnership. I'm going to pause here and let you ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Clancy. We will now go into our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is in terms of language. If you could just discuss any limitations you see with your study, based on the global threat and all the foreign languages that are involved with hacktivism, and how you would address that. Thank you.
Great question. And we've already run into this with the terror contagion research, because these are global terror contagions. Obviously, in one sense, the internet is often expressed in English, and that can tie it together. We found Russian terror contagions that are using English, but also a lot of the cultural scripts we identify and track aren't even language specific. They may be mimetic, coming through memes or images. It could be video, audio. So it's the ability to both get visual information as a cultural script that spreads a message, but also looking at where English provides that common background. If we wanted to look at specific areas that were outside non-English, we'd have to bring in partners to do that. But we found in doing this with terrorism, a lot of the spread of the contagion in that global population, it's an internet tied together by English and arising those threats in that common language, even if they themselves may not have sympathies or any exposure to a Western country. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My question is on the lines of, a lot of times state sponsors of state actors are masquerading as hacktivists. How does that come into your analysis and the idea that you have trouble with attribution?
Well, and this is the benefit of using an existing theory. So we know what organic social contagions look like. We know it from celebrity suicide, which has that 4 decades of empirically research. We know it from terrorism, where we've done it ourselves. The Columbine school shooting, we've replicated that over time. We have a good data set of what organic looks like. We also know what state sponsored. A gentleman earlier asked about, how do you distinguish between a sudden event and an ongoing event like a 9/11 scenario? You can look at the velocity of change as a contagion spreads and compare that wave behavior against organic spreads. And you can say, was there a sudden 9/11? Was there a sudden 7 October? And look at that velocity of change and then begin to distinguish, does this look like a pattern we've seen before? And you can mathematically calculate it to some level of confidence. Or does this look like something that just out of the blue hit a tipping point and threshold effect, which leads to indication of state sponsored? There's also idiomatic and cultural scripts clues that are going to come. Different state sponsors use these cultural scripts in different ways, and you can create a profile of what their techniques look like and detect those in the cultural scripts that are being spread.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your responses here. I had a question about your description of this being an adaptation of an existing model that you have a lot of data and have tested on. So do you have a working hypothesis about how there is a potential difference, or is your hypothesis it works exactly the same? Where are you in terms of testing and validating this translation of your work on terrorism to this new scenario?
Right. So we can talk generally and then isolate it. Generally, when we built the original system structure, it was radicalization spreading as a social contagion broadly. Lots of case studies in that with different kinds, and toxicity, harassment, violence. When we applied it to public mass killings, we specifically modified that the media generation event would be a single public mass killing incident that had so many fatalities that generates that media coverage. But in a way, that's a proxy for media attention that can help generate initial interest. And we can use the simulation and say that media attention is coming from a different source. It may be a state-sponsored input, as the previous gentleman said, that's driving that awareness of it. It could be a building over time. It could be an existing ongoing effect. So we have the ability to adapt this and look at the different levers that are driving this media spread, not just tying it to a public mass killing, which is obviously very extreme. However, these contagions, part of our model is it's looking over 10 years. They do come up. There's years of inactivity. Something happens and it pops up. And that's where we'd work to make sure we can replicate both the historical hacktivist contagions to build confidence that we're tracking actual hacktivism contagion events and not just trying to say, well, this worked for terrorism, it will work here.
30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up, because we emphasize also the partner engagement, how would you see working with a partner to help them understand and use all of this? So you talked about trust and verification of some of these things, validation of some of these things. What are some of the steps you would take to make sure that an end user really recognizes where the sources are coming from and how one thing is different so that they could use this potentially in decision making?
So it happens in 3 phases. I'm going to be brief because I know we're at time. The first phase is during the adaptation itself. You bring them inside, work with on the models, and get their own understanding of the models as you're building it so they can challenge it, they can question it, they can kick the tires. You do confidence building through replicating those historicals to say, let's see if we can replicate. And then you give them tools where they can interact and play with it themselves and understand how it's working. Part of this is educating on a theory of change. How do contagions spread so they can understand it dynamically to build that trust to then say, okay, this model with lots of things going on, what's really happening in here? So it happens at 3 stages throughout the partnership, and we've done this before with other models and simulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clancy. We are at time. We will now head into a 10-minute break and meet back here at 2:29. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We will now head into our presentations for our final topic area, persona and influence. Next up, we have the University of Hawaii at Manoa.
Hello, this is the University of Hawaii's presentation for Topic 2, Persona and Influence. For this, we decided to focus on a specific scenario, that being detecting the People's Republic of China's malign influence campaigns using large language models. As for our team, we're the Software Assurance Laboratory. We have extensive experience developing a broad range of cybersecurity solutions using AI and ML techniques to automate the generation of cyber intelligence. In addition, we have prior experience working with numerous government agencies, such as the DoD and DHS. Our team is comprised of Mehdi, myself, Derek, and Samantha. Delving more into the problem, there is an increasing push by the PRC to use social media to facilitate influence campaigns aimed at manipulating public opinion, destabilizing societies, and undermining the democratic process in the US and Indo-Pacific region. Some examples of this include manipulating elections, spreading health misinformation, credential harvesting, and fostering division by trying to amplify conflicts. With these campaigns, we aim to develop a system that can accurately detect false personas, messaging using advanced techniques with large language models. We will implement LLMs that utilize techniques such as sentiment analysis, narrative generation, and coalition analysis. This will be built on top of the transformer architecture to enable the model to continuously learn from new data in order to detect new and evolving misinformation campaigns. Expanding on the key features of our detection methodology, we will implement sentiment analysis, which gives us a classification for each post, such as positive, negative, or neutral. Narrative generation, which will supply a summary for all of the user's posts, and coalition analysis, which allows us to map connections between other accounts and entities, helping in the identification of behavioral patterns indicative of coordinated efforts. By combining these 3 techniques, we will be able to determine if a persona is being used in a malign influence campaign. Our approach stands out due to its capacity to continuously learn from new data. By implementing LLMs, we can swiftly address emerging disinformation campaigns. These models allow us to incorporate culturally relevant information from both the attackers' and targets' perspectives. For instance, when addressing misinformation targeted at Hawaii, our model would consider the context of the Maui wildfires. In addition, this capability enables us to detect subtle natures of propaganda, such as different wording conveying the same meaning, ensuring high accuracy in identifying false personas. The applications and impacts of our tool are vast. For social media monitoring, it helps build public trust by identifying and mitigating disinformation. In election security, it aims in informed decision-making by reducing interference and manipulation. For public health, it ensures accurate information flow with less noise, reducing panic and instability during a crisis. Additionally, in corporate and national security, it strengthens protective measures, safeguarding democratic processes and enhancing overall security. Having a robust data pipeline is essential to our approach. This involves collecting data from various social media platforms by using web scraping and APIs. The data is then ingested into AWS for pre-processing and streaming, ensuring it is clean and ready for analysis. This processed data feeds into our model, which continuously learns and adapts to detect new threats. The inputs and outputs are then stored for ongoing learning and threat detection. One of our primary goals is to ensure our model can easily integrate into existing systems. To achieve this, we plan to make it deployable on AWS and ensure seamless integration through the development of multiple APIs. These APIs will facilitate various functions, such as alerting on detections, ingesting data, and querying specific accounts and detected anomalies, among others. When it comes to our partner engagement plan, we plan on first identifying potential DoD partners. On the island, we have various organizations such as PACOM and Army DevCom, which we believe will find this proposal particularly interesting. Once a partner is established, we plan on implementing regular communication strategies, including bi-weekly meetings and progress report to provide clear updates on progress, challenges, and milestones through secure platforms. Our approach will be collaborative by securely sharing our findings, data insights, and model updates. This will facilitate feedback and iteration to ensure we meet our partners' needs. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now head into our 5 minutes of Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I had a question about localizing your large language models for potential scenarios. You gave the example of wildfires. Can you talk about any other examples and how you understand that helps localize for identifying false personas in your approach?
Yes. So what I would say as far as localization is that LLMs in general have a large context window. So they're going to know all of these other data sources ahead of time, not just for our particular use case, but for many other use cases, because they use data from all other sources when being trained as well. So as far as other things, you could think about California. They always have issues with earthquakes and natural disasters. So there might be propaganda spread in that sense as well. And that would be something that would be taken into consideration also.
I would just add one sentence that cultural matters on the island would be important. Often Hawaii is an island with rich culture, and that's something that we could leverage, potentially identify a malign user or users that are falsely representing themselves. There are some other local data set that could potentially be tapped once we get threat intelligence. They tell us a lot of activities that China has on the island. Maui fire was one of them, but there are a lot of soldiers on the island that China's propaganda is working on them to impact their minds before a war and so on. So I think those factors can be potentially used to fine-tune the LLMs, take into account the cultural settings of the islands. So we could differentiate users that are local from the users that are from other part of the world. But also previous campaigns that we have information that has happened or regularly happens on the island.
Thank you. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a second question related to your team and to integrating some of those cultural perspectives. You mentioned some of this already, but if you could elaborate, particularly in understanding adversarial, such as China's influence, are you anticipating doing this work all in English? Any other particular languages for the region? How are you narrowing your focus, and how are you understanding where the directionality of these different misinformation and sentiment campaigns might be coming from?
Good question. So one of the advantages is that the transformers that are underlying for the large language models are language agnostic. So if you have adversaries that are from other languages, it's very beneficial to know how they're thinking and their cultural relevance, and that might help us actually target those propaganda itself. And then the other flip side of that is we still have English as well, so that we can see how they're targeting us too.
In terms of communities, often these propaganda are targeting certain communities on the island or broadly. You see before elections, there are certain types of propaganda, but once it becomes to army, public affairs and soldiers and so on, there are different types of propaganda. But on the island, we are having 70% populations are Asian ethnicities coming from different languages and backgrounds. So these propaganda necessarily is not going to be in English. But the beauty of the technique is that is language agnostic, so we could incorporate those. Native Hawaiian language is one that is not very well studied. So that could be a target. Now we see a lot of artifacts being produced locally to preserve that, and that could be the target of it. But English would be one of the major languages, and Asian spoken languages as well on the islands. There are several different ethnicities.
30 seconds remaining. Judges, are there any other questions, or is there anything that your team maybe wanted to touch on that you didn't get a chance to?
We would just like to say we have prior experience using LLMs in other cybersecurity research areas, so we're confident that this is a very doable solution.
Thank you so much, Mr. Katz. We are at time. We will
Thank you.
now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberations. Now we will hear from the Department of Computer Science at UC San Diego.
CTAs overwhelmingly employ social engineering to infiltrate government and organizations, spread propaganda and disinformation online, and conduct fraud and espionage. Social engineering attacks account for more than 80% of all cyber attacks and 70% of nation-state attacks, as compared to direct attacks on computing infrastructure itself. 68% of enterprise data breaches involve human elements, and according to an FTC estimate, consumers lose approximately $137 billion a year to fraud in the United States. CTAs leverage several asymmetrical advantages in order to bypass existing detection methods. These existing detection methods only expose cheap, disposable, surface-level infrastructure, such as IP addresses and domains. And CTAs can use scale and tools, such as botnets and VPNs, to get around this. They also tend to operate cross-platform and in end-to-end encrypted channels, where detection is impossible because there's no visibility into communication. As AI fraud grows, it's due to better AI-generated deepfakes. Next, I'm going to show you an example of one of the fastest growing and most extreme forms of social engineering fraud right now, called pig butchering. It starts benignly with a text message, and then the CTA requests to move off-platform to WhatsApp, which is an end-to-end encrypted messaging platform. What ensues are daily messages between the CTA and the victim as they slowly build up trust with the victim. Over 1 month later, the CTA reveals their true intention. They want the victim to download a malicious app from the Apple App Store. This app is a crypto investment scam app, and once the victim downloads this and inputs their personal information, all of their money will disappear. So how can we defend against such a sophisticated form of social engineering fraud over such a long time horizon? What if I told you that in that example that I just showed, it was not an interaction between a CTA and a real human victim, but was instead an interaction between a CTA and our technology, which is a honeypot large language model chatbot, which emulates human victims and interacts with the CTAs to draw them out to monitor and gather intel on infiltration, propaganda, disinformation, fraud, and espionage. That crypto investment scam app was something our technology discovered, and this app is still on the App Store today. With our technology, we could shut down this infrastructure.
As opposed to existing methods of detection, our core technology allows for interactive investigations that draw out the attackers to uncover the persistent infrastructure that existing detection methods neglect. These include the attacker's personas and playbooks with the detailed conversations that have text, image, audio, video. We can identify financial accounts, illicit crypto wallets. We can infer their geographies, their native languages, identify malware, fraudulent apps, and determine whether they're using AI capabilities right now. All of these are crucial, expensive, and persisting infrastructure for the adversaries. This is a different view of what a single honeypot can uncover. It is a trace, a cyber threat trace, or a fingerprint that we can then use to cluster these criminals. Imagine deploying millions of defensive bots on end-to-end encrypted channels to conduct millions of these conversations. We can then gather all of these traces, and then the conversations can be clustered and analyzed using all of this combined evidence to shut down the attackers. We have three main methods of engaging with DoD partners: proactively by sharing the intel that we uncover, reactively by helping match real victims to our database, and helping DoD partners interactively customize their own honeypot personas. For proactive engagement, we plan to build a dashboard of the growing cyber trends that we uncover and give it a way to explore all of our cyber threat traces that you just saw. For reactive engagement, we provide a private online platform that DoD partners can upload real victims, which we can then analyze and match to our database such that we can aggregate evidence and aid law enforcement takedowns. And finally, we plan to interactively allow DoD partners to customize their own honeypot personas to enable specialized investigations. They can control the attributes, behaviors, locations, native languages of these personas, as well as they can determine and select strategic positions to deploy these honeypots, whether they be across platforms inside of existing organizations or as entire organizations themselves.
We're an academic team from UC San Diego. Daniel and I are PhD students who have led large interdisciplinary ML research teams to formulate new tasks, and we are NSF DRFP fellows. We have publications at top-tier ML NLP conferences, and we work with 3 professors from UCSD as well. Professors Savage and Volker are cybersecurity professors with a combined 40-plus years of experience researching real-world cybercrime. Their cryptocurrency tracing techniques are used by all major law enforcement bodies. Professor Bert Kirkpatrick has deep expertise in AI and generative modeling, and he has over 100 papers at top AI, ML, and NLP venues. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now go into our judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is really based on how you see your research progressing. It sounds like you have a great foundation, and the approach that you're taking sounds very logical to me. What do you see as the next steps in terms of maturing or building out for your proposal? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we spent the last year working on this research, developing the core NLP technology for the honeypot, as well as building all of the automations, because these honeypots are able to go from one platform to another in a single conversation, such as like an SMS to a WhatsApp. And right now, we've just partnered with a small telco provider that has given us access to a large telephony infrastructure for us to essentially deploy these honeypots. And so this is where we're currently at, is essentially scaling these out on tens of thousands of phones spread across the entire US.
This is the follow-up question is like, I wonder how sustainable your approach is. It feels like you're just entering a new antivirus, adapt environment with adversaries. How much do where you create a better detector, they create detectors, detect your LLMs, and you go back and forth. How sustainable do you have ideas on how, how long is it going to last before you're going to have to be modifying again?
Right. So currently attackers are able to use scale to defeat these systems. And one reason they're able to use scale is because once they're detected, they get to retry with these disposable assets that we showed in our presentation. And one thing that we're targeting is actually deploying all of these kind of live honeypots so that instead of detecting them and throwing them off, where they can just get some cheap disposable information again, like a new phone number or a new social media account, we can actually fingerprint like their core infrastructure, like their financials, the stuff that takes a lot of time to set up, the stuff that might have some like know your customer requirements with financial institutions. That way we can actually shut them down. But just separately from that, we're also wasting their time. So while we're talking with them, they're not talking to potentially real victims. So I would say those are the two main ways we can keep this going and make this sustainable.
Yeah, I have a brief follow-up to that too. I think that's it's a really interesting question. I mean, in a way, I think that we have an advantage here over kind of traditional antivirus techniques, which you're right, it's an absolute arms race and it kind of goes back and forth. Here we're kind of taking advantage of the same thing that these types of social engineering scams are taking advantage of, which is there's a certain kind of softness to this high touch interaction that actually means at the end of the day, the attacker may not know if they were talking to an LLM. Like this can go on for months and they might be like, oh, okay, I don't know if it worked or not. Let's move on to the next one. We're not necessarily trying to detect and stop them at the gates. We're trying to do reconnaissance. We're trying to build up a really large database of all these hidden social interactions so we can use this for data science and matching future interactions. So it's, while, you know, it's possible they'll catch on and see that it is an LLM and LLMs will get better, go back and forth. We don't think that will be nearly as tight of a loop as it is for other detection technologies.
Okay, all right. Oh, thanks for answering my question.
Are there any other questions from the judges, or is anything that your team would like to expand upon?
I mean, I guess one thing that I'll just say that we're really excited about is in kind of thinking about influence campaigns at a large scale. There's definitely a lot of this happening all over the public web right now, and it's super important to analyze that to get a handle on what's going on. From what we've seen in the financial fraud domain, targeting currently mainly civilians and trying to defraud them of money, we think that there's kind of another wave of influence that's going to happen in the near future, if not already, which is on end-to-end encrypted direct messaging platforms. And right now that will be totally invisible. So we're hoping this technology we're building will offer another way of kind of getting access to that kind of influence campaign that right now is hard to touch.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberations. Next up, we will hear from the team from Augusta University.
Good afternoon. This is the team Identity. I'm Sejun Song, a professor at the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences at Augusta University. Our project team has research lineages in NSF I-Core and PFI projects. I bring over 10 years of industry experiences, including software engineer at Cisco Systems and Honeywell. Have led several Air Force Research Lab and ONR projects in cybersecurity. Our primary focus area is AI in cybersecurity. The Identity proposes AI-based software modules for identity authentication to combat presentation and deepfake attacks using eye reflections. Face recognition-based touchless identity authentication applications such as unmanned kiosk, smartphone security, Air Force check-ins, and banks are prevalent. However, these systems are not foolproof. For instance, Face ID, Android face security system often hacking attempts soon after release, while iPhone's hardware solution use depth sensors, motion challenges, and texture analysis. They still remain vulnerable to sophisticated attacks like 3D silicon masks, deepfakes, and master faces or replay attacks. Unlike a password, biometric data cannot be kept secret. Like Patrick Mahomes, very famous football player, his high-quality pictures are everywhere. You can get it from internet search and social media. Thus, the critical factor is liveness, not secrecy. You can make any biometric data nowadays. Recent AI advancement has enhanced the quality of malicious spoofing and deepfake attacks, making them harder to detect and reducing the cost, expertise, and time required to generate these spoofs. The rise of virtual human and avatar further complicate those situations. Now, allow me to introduce the identity solution. When my daughter was young, she told me, "I see me in your eyes," when she looked at my face. This inspired the idea that your eyes show what your eyes see. Our research found that most attacks fail to coordinate counterfeit with reflective components. It is challenging to forge multiple surrounding semantics like illumination, environmental conditions. Hence, we focus on most reflective part of human face, the eyes. Identity use non-destructive challenge response mechanisms and AI-based analysis. During face recognition, screen displays a sequence of challenges such as a simple shape and colors. The front camera captures the reflection in the eyes. We have developed AI model to detect patterns and extract features to classify liveness and deepfake. We analyze not just the shape of the reflection, but their semantics, including environmental matches, color, and light strengths. We will create deepfake and liveness attack datasets, implementing our solution across platforms and conduct experimental based on a FIDO alliance model using 2D and 3D attacks under various environmental conditions. The software can be developed as a standalone application and as a complementary mitigation modules for other biometric authentication tools. One of the most significant benefits of this project is its potential application in various security use cases, including two-factor authentication, continuous and zero-trust authentication. Located in Georgia Cyber Center, Augusta University will establish a partnership with local DoD, NSA, and Army cyber training centers. AI in biometric authentication is an ongoing topic of collaboration with Army Chief Data Officer and Regional Engagement Principal at NSIN, and it is amid at developing cybersecurity and data training courses. Thanks for listening to the Identity Project brief. We are looking forward to its commercial adoption and collaboration with DoD partners. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions or want to discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now head into our 5 minutes of Q&A with our judging panel. Judges, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon.
Hello.
My question is in reference to the next steps in your research proposal here. And I was wondering if you could just provide a little more information on where you see your next steps taking you. And then my side question along with that is just in terms of the technology that you're using, is this open source or is this patented technology? It seems to me there's a lot of research into this particular area. So I was curious on, any proprietary patents or things of that nature that might either limit, the sharing or access that you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Actually, that addressed a lot of things that I envisioned. One is the next project I really want to go with this one is continuous and zero trust authentication. Because in the next environment, we are not just going through one authentication. So we try to provide intrusive continuous authentication through those challenges. And then we just look at the the reflection changes. Another important thing is we are not rely on the shape. We are rely on the combination of all different environments. So those things can develop a lot of different directions, and also there are several different environment in the military or other applications. So we also want to go through that. And the IP point of view, we apply the the proprietary of the application first, and then I got as this one as a waiver. So currently we are not covering this one as a IP point of view. However, our purpose is this one can be used as a complementary for other existing face-based authentication tools. So we didn't make this as a open source, but for example, CVPR, we made that as available for the code all those things, and also data sets. So I can make that available in any case. We have two different data sets. One is about the deepfake data set. Another one is about this kind of challenge and response data sets. Did I answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question in the sense that right now, I completely agree. None of the image technologies we have are going to be calculating eye reflections and stuff. Do you think if your method of detecting liveness is known to an adversary, that it's going to last as a defense?
Yeah, so that is basically, I went through all the GAN generation software algorithms, and then so far there is no, basically there are two things. One is if you are concentrated on those reflections, real image, the created image is not as real as possible. So basically there is no, but the problem is always, what if they address that, and how we can handle. So that part, actually, we are dealing with the combination. There are several approaches using shape consistency, and those things are easily blocked or easily failed. But our kind of semantic approach, that will be, more stronger when we get more data. And also we will make a more specific scenarios to put the different results.
All right. Thank you. The one quick follow-up is, how do glasses affect your technology?
Exactly. So there is one test result. We show that everything we want to respond to this one within 200 milliseconds. And then those glasses, if you wear sunglasses, it won't make a good result. But if you wear glasses, they are looking for the reflections, not the shape of the reflection. We found we detect very well with those.
Okay.
So
all right, thank you.
So like military, they have something, the goggles, still we can handle those authentication part.
All right, thank
Thank you so much, Mr. Song. We are at time. We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberations. We will now hear from the Media Forensics Hub at Clemson University.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your time. The Clemson Media Forensics Hub is tackling Problem 2A, recognize and attribute malign use of false personas in messaging. Our solution to that problem is the Foreign Influence Detection Network Detector, or FIND. The FIND project team is made up of some of the nation's leading experts in social media disinformation, as well as experts in artificial intelligence and visual analytics. The real benefit of FIND, what sets it apart, is that it isn't just a concept. Find is a process we have been applying as we've developed it iteratively over the past 5 years. We've worked with journalists, federal partners, as well as social media platforms in identifying, reporting on, and mitigating the harms of malign foreign influence. Find has 5 steps. The first of those steps is to define the topic that you believe may be a target of foreign malign influence. By way of example, we have defined one topic of including 256,000 tweets about AUKUS, the trilateral security partnership between the US, Australia, and New Zealand. These tweets were both for and against the partnership. Steps 2 and 3 are the real core of Find. Step 2 is to define objects of influence. Objects of influence are those things which a malign actor wants to change the prominence of within the digital ecosystem. Step 3 is defining flags. Flags are markers of account behavior placed on individual accounts. These are markers that are suggestive of inauthenticity, but weak evidence individually. It's only at the statistical level that flags are valuable. Again, these things are best understood by way of example. In our AUKUS data, we looked at several different objects of influence, including hashtags, domains, and usernames. Flags we used in this data set included baby, a flag placed on all accounts that were newly created. Hyper, this was a flag we placed on all accounts that appeared frequently in the data set. Egg, this was a flag placed on accounts using the default profile. First, this was a flag placed on all accounts that tweeted in the first second of the minute. That's a sign of automation. And flood, a flag placed on all accounts that frequently used verbatim content. The next step is to calculate the rate at which flags appear connected to each object of influence and use statistical methods to detect outliers in the distribution. So, for instance, is there a particular hashtag that has an unusual percentage of baby accounts talking about that hashtag? You can then move to start to look at the individual accounts and understand, are there sets of accounts that talk about more than one outlier object of influence? So for instance, those baby accounts that were talking about the hashtag, are they talking about more than one outlier hashtag? Or are they talking about that outlier hashtag as well as an outlier domain or an outlier narrative? It's from this point that we can really start looking at the individual accounts and visualize their activity over time. We've begun to develop a dashboard to do just that. Within the AUKUS data set, we were able to identify 9 different networks of activity. Here we see examples from just one of those networks. Believe it or not, these are 12 different accounts that clearly operate within pods operated by individual operators. These accounts belong to, we believe, were operated by the Chinar Corps. That's an Indian government operation that communicated a lot of negative disinformation about China, which is why they showed up in this campaign, because of the relationship between China and AUKUS. Now, this visualization shows the x-axis is hour of the day, and the y-axis is number of posts per hour. Color is the client that was used to make the post. So you can see that these accounts are all operating within unison. What's really valuable about this type of visualization is that we can keep these accounts anonymous until the moment we actively want to de-anonymize them. As we've done here, these accounts all belong to that third column, the third row that we saw previously. Individually, these accounts may look incredibly authentic. It's only as a group that Find helped us shine the spotlight on, that we see how inauthentic they truly are. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now head into our 5 minutes of Q&A with the judges. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is about the next steps of your research proposal and where you see this going after this. It sounds like you've done quite a bit of work on it. So yeah, just really curious on where you go next. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a few places we want to go. The first is to broaden across platforms. We've got this working right now on Twitter and on about 6 or 7 other kind of alt tech platforms. We're really interested in making this work well on visual platforms like YouTube or TikTok and those sorts of places. It's going to involve some of our AI partners to do extraction of messages from video, including not just the transcript, but also trying to extract information from the video itself. That's a major step we want to take. Darren, was there another?
We also want to move into real, or at least near real-time detection. Right now, Find is an application we use on a very case-by-case basis. Here's an interesting subject, another interesting subject like AUKUS, for instance. But we want to be able to engage in some ongoing detection of, a particular sets of communities or nation states.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much for the presentation and your responses to our questions. I had a question. First of all, it's interesting that you want to move towards the visual, but I had a question about how you help or how you start defining the malign influence and how you separate that from other types of influence, or how you narrow in on your scenarios. Do you do that purely with partners? Do you do that from literature? How do you go about scoping those to define and begin your approach?
Yeah, so at its base, this is a detection for coordinated influence. Some of the markers suggest inauthenticity, so I'd go so far as to call it inauthentic coordinated influence. But to make that next step, to make it malign inauthentic for influence, it involves actually getting down into the content to some extent. We've got a lot of experience in many operators and sort of aligning the sorts of messaging that they're doing, the sort of tactics they're doing with past examples of that is really the best we can do for attribution. Attribution is always the hardest step, right? Identifying coordinated and authentic behavior is hard enough. Taking that next step to attribution is difficult. So right now we just have historical methods of attribution.
Thank you. And another question, you had mentioned a couple different times, different teammates that you work with, both on the technical side and perhaps the social behavioral science side. Can you talk about any other team members that contribute to your solution here?
You mean partners, or do you mean people at Clemson?
Any partners that would help you deliver on this, that you rely on, and that contribute to this. And it's a question that I haven't really asked everybody. How also might they help you interact with the DoD stakeholders, since we asked for a partner engagement plan? So what role, if any, do they play in that?
Well, we're excited to be, this was mentioned actually in the open, we're excited to be part of the Academic Engagement Network, and we're hoping to, deepen that partnership as we progress. We've developed some partnerships with some other universities. The Find approach, we've worked in collaboration with some folks in Australia. That's why we looked at AUKUS, because we had a collaboration at QUT. And then we've also done a little work with some NATO partners at the Center for Strategic Communication.
And an element of the visualization techniques, we partnered with a couple of years ago with Army Research Labs in sharing that process with them.
Great. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
There are no other questions from the judges. Is there anything, Patrick or Darren, that you'd like to touch on before we finish up this session?
Let me highlight one strength that I think maybe didn't come across so much in our pitch, and that is the difficulty of bad actors to kind of avoid this detection technology. There's a lot of detection technologies out there, many of which are kind of highly supervised or lean on sort of one element of behavior. This technology is so general that any campaign that's trying to do coordinated influence is going to have a hard time dodging this technology. I think that's one of the biggest strengths.
Thank you so much. We are at time.
Thank
We'll
you.
now head into our 2 minutes of deliberation. Next up, we will hear from Morgan State University.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter Taiwe, faculty researcher at Morgan State University Center for Equitable AI Learning Systems and lecturer at EC department. Joining me today is Kelechi Nwachukwu, our center's research engineering manager and a faculty also at the EC department. So we are part of a dedicated research team led by Dr. Kofi Yako, the director of Seamless and also professor at EC. Today, we are excited to discuss our project focused on identifying and counteracting online persona fabrication and misuse. The proposal represents our commitment to advancing this important work and has been submitted to the NSIN 2024 Cyber Innovators Challenge. In today's digital age, online personas are an embodiment of the dual-use dilemma in digital innovation. While they facilitate anonymity and freedom, they also create a playground for cyber threats. Fabricated personas have the power to manipulate public opinion and sway political and social narratives. Our concern stems from observing major events such as the misinformation campaign during the US presidential election in 2016 and the spread of false information through fake accounts during the COVID-19 pandemic. The online world is a vast and intricate ecosystem composed of diverse data sources, including social media networks, mobile apps, cloud services, all dynamically interacting in a continuously evolving digital landscape. This complexity poses significant challenges for managing and verifying online identities. Our goal is to cut through this complexity by accurately detecting and disambiguating fake personas, analyzing behavioral patterns to predict and mitigate harmful activities. It's a complex task, but essential for safeguarding the integrity of online communities.
Which brings us to the overarching objectives associated with this project. The goal here is to be able to detect fake personas with extremely high accuracy using some of the latest machine learning technologies to analyze latent patterns that predict and mitigate harmful activities, as well as being able to disseminate this information in an easy-to-use graphical manner. The system is divided into 3 concurrent patterns. We have the data collection system, which is a part of the original disambiguation engine that relies on publicly available data, specifically social media data, with a focus on ethical acquisition of this data so that we can ensure that the use of the system in the future does not encroach on any current policies. For the the context-based model generation, we are implementing a multimodal, multi-ensemble system based on a more traditional machine learning techniques using word-to-vec embedding generation or logistic regressions. But then we are aiming to bolster this with a transformer implementation, specifically BERT, due to its ability to synthesize structure, semantic, as well as vocabulary. This way, we can pull together the individual advantages of the ensemble system to produce a more robust disambiguating model. Finally, as you can see, we are also we're expending some efforts to add a user interface to make the system more available to the public. For the data flow here, we are focusing on we have a transition from raw data to implementing a new schema that enables accelerated or distributed computation. But the main focus in here is on the disambiguation model generation and the dissemination using dashboards to make the system highly accessible. We also have in here demonstrating the fact that the disambiguation model generation is our primary focus, with a transition then to user interactivity as well as real-time processing. The project has been divided into 6 phases spanning across 13 months, with the first 3 phases focusing on core data acquisition, model design, and development, while the last 3 phases are ensuring that the system is robust enough, stable enough for end user consumption.
Now, addressing potential risk is crucial for this sort of project. So we've identified a number of key challenges. This include data privacy issues, technology adaptation, algorithmic bias, and the need for real-time processing capabilities. So we've mapped out mitigation strategies for each of these, such as implementing encryption to ensure data privacy and ensuring that our data sets are diversified and representative. We also plan to continuously monitor and evaluate state-of-the-art alternative technologies to ensure that our solutions remain up-to-date, innovation-wise, and effective.
I hope at this point in time we have addressed the fact that the main goal of this project is to reverse the direction of infodynamics using multimodal, multi-ensemble machine learning models to counteract misinformation, advance public collaboration, and build a safer digital future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will now go into our 5 minutes of judge Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Just one question. My question is related to the, I guess it's really the training of your models here and how you envision this. When you talked about, one of the goals to detect fake personas with high accuracy, it just immediately made me think of type 1 and type 2 errors. And I was just curious then, how you address that in your model, and if that is something that you can do in training, or is that more of an iterative approach per release? Thank you.
So, Dr. you want to take this? Or you want me to take this?
You can go ahead.
So specifically your type 1 errors, we are focusing on detecting a fake persona, not necessarily to attribute that persona to any specific individual. That way you enforce or you empower the user to immediately detect that this sort of information, this misinformation campaign is what it is directed at you, thereby increasing your likelihood to not be deceived. For the type 2 error specifically, the proposal we have today is being benched on top of a previous technology, the Cyber Identity Reconciliation Engine, which focuses on separating or at least clustering specific users into different spaces. So all we need to do now, especially with the hashing function itself, is to assign individual clusters of users with specific identities, helping us to at least, in theory, disambiguate users by the clusters that we have of them.
In addition to that, we earlier on when we tried to prove this concept, we use TF-IDF, but now we are trying to improve that so that we can include some context-based detection, not just using individual words or terms that we're using to do detection. We're even going further than that to make sure that we apply state-of-the-art model like transformers, which can actually not just look at words in isolation, but how it's used in context, which can vary in meaning from even one sentence to another or one post to another.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the judges?
Yes, I had a question also. You talk about various risk mitigation strategies, including bias detection for your model and your data. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So when it comes to bias, so we're looking at it from the point of view that our center is actually a lot concerned about us developing solutions, AI solutions that are trustworthy and bias-free, and make sure that whatever we are putting out there has a high fairness score. So first of all, we want to be sure that we use data sets that are diversified and also representative of different social groups that we are covering, and also to make sure that there is no bias when it comes to probably cultural nuances that has to do with use of languages, where we can flag someone as maybe fake, but it's just based on the context of how languages are used or how they present themselves of different cultures. So we're going to really pay attention to that. So it's very important that we focus on that.
And let me just tack on real quick. One of our focuses in one of the centers is we have this bias model in order to detect when, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the recidivism data set. We are attempting to, actually the model itself is attempting to pull out the biases in these particular data set in order to ensure that the future implementation or the inference portion of your model is not influenced by inherent bias in your data.
Thank you for that.
So much. We are at time.
Thank you.
We will now head into our 2 minutes of judge deliberations. For our last presentation, we will hear from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs.
Good morning. My name is Shouhuai Xu, professor from University of Colorado Springs. The title of my PhD is Trust, an innovative training program to counter cyber influencer attacks. Here is a brief overview of my pitch. Here is my team. I really want to highlight my incoming PhD student, Master Surgeon Bunny Russian. She has done published research on adversarial influence in DoD environment. This will be her PhD dissertation topic, and this is perfectly aligned with the innovation topic. She will make history after receiving her PhD in 2027, because she will become the first from enlisted to PhD to professor at any service academy. She cannot be here today because she is receiving DoD training for her promotion from Master Surgeon to Senior Master Surgeon. So what's the problem? As shown in the picture on the right from Journal Publications 3-12, DoD clearly recognized cyber persona as one critical component of its cyberspace operations environment. Our ultimate goal is to defeat cyber influencer attacks. Solution overview. We have 3 tasks that will be accomplished within 10 months. Task 1 is to design the training program based on our fundamental research results. Task 2 is to develop the training program into a system, and task 3 is to test our system in both DoD and the academic environment. Key features of our solutions. We have conducted fundamental research to identify the root causes of cyber social engineering attacks, which include cyber influencer attacks. The root causes include psychological tactics, psychological techniques, and psychological factors. We will synergize them into a unified training program with the 5 pillars, TRUST, or trust. Unique selling point. The trust program will have both online and offline versions. It will be unclassified. You got our commitment for at least 3 years because this is perfectly aligned with Bunny's PhD dissertation research. This type of long-term commitment is critical to sustaining the success of the program. So what's the impact? From my perspective, preventing another incident of slowdown or its like is critical to DoD And that's one of our ultimate research goals. Let's also hear what Master Surgeon Russian has to say about the impact, and you can notice her passion about the project.
What are the impacts? This is a critical educational moment for DoD members. Being able to mitigate these types of influence attacks would save so much time and money in the long run. Forget the training time. Forget the complaints you might hear from your troops. This is about mitigating the loss or misuse of money, resources, classified materials, system accesses, credentials, reputation, user privacy. JKO is our preferred online host. It's already up and running and has many other trainings that we can use as a blueprint to activate our trust program.
Proof of concept, why this solution will succeed. Barney's research in DoD environment showed that digital literacy is effective in mitigating cyber influencer attacks. Our fundamental research has identified the root causes of these attacks. So we're going to synergize these two perspectives into a unified training program. Partner engagement plan. We will work closely and proactively with our DoD partners. For example, Lieutenant Colonel Stewart from Space Force, because this is closely related to his job duty. I hope you are convinced that trust is a greater solution to the problem, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We'll now go into our 5 minutes of judging Q&A. Judges, please go ahead.
I thank you for the presentation. My question is really based on your concept here. Where do you see your next steps? You know, if funded, what would be the next steps for your research? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Excellent question. So we already did the research. Actually, it's over past years, I worked with 5 psychology professors. Finally, we got the root cause, what we call the psychological XYZ, tactics, techniques, and factors. So we are gonna transition that, synergize them, transition into training program. And we're gonna test that as in DoD environment, because Bonnie, in her DoD role prior to joining PhD program in a couple of months, she already did that. So this is the transition part. I think this is the, relatively speaking, we know how bureaucratic it is, but it is relatively speaking, I think probably is the easiest part. I want to leverage this to point out something I didn't kind of make in the presentation, which is we all know how AI machine learning is powerful. Okay, we can detect this, we can detect that, but I'm gonna use an analogy. AI machine learning is kind of like the warhead in our missile. I can have a super powerful warhead which can shoot 10 millions of miles. Okay. However, don't forget we must have very precise, accurate guidance system in order for the missile to be useful. You can shoot 1 million miles, but you're off target. So what is that guidance system? It's the root courses. So I'm training my PhD trained as in cryptography. I'm a technical guy, but I'm one of the few technical guys which realize the limitation of pure technology. And in this context of this project, it's really the human factor. That's the last line of defense. No matter how good the technology is, eventually it is the human. It's the human beings that matters. So I hope you can spread this message to DoD broader context, because not many people realize this, and I'm really advocating this. Sorry, I over answered your question.
No, thank you very much. Just real briefly though, you mentioned human subjects a number of times. Do you have IRB limitations? Could you just briefly talk about how that affects your research? Thank you.
Thank you. So far, the research we connected the data, I work with our IRB in the past years. For this sequence of research, we have not, they said that we do not need. But I do have other research I need the IRB. And Bonnie did the research at the Air Force Academy, as you can imagine. That's only the IRB, because the Academy is even more restrictive. So we are conscious of that. We're going to certainly do this at the IRB.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation and for the response to our questions. I wanted to know more about if you're focusing now on transitioning this to training. You were asked in your proposal about evaluation metrics in working with a DoD partner. So how would you understand success of transitioning this beyond just having a training course? What does success look like with our partners?
So I just want to slightly kind of fine-tune that. Transition that is certainly they because we already did the fundamental research, but in the process we're gonna kind of what is the right word? Kind of incorporate the new findings from ours or from others. The reason I'm saying this is because I'm graduating 2 PhD students, their dissertation exactly on this topic. So and actually one of the PhD dissertation is exactly how to design training program so that it will be effective, meaning the trainees will be effective in receiving the training. So I discussed this with Bonnie, and she already developed the kind of the metrics for what he used when evaluating her training program in the past in DoD environment. So we're going to leverage that as a starting point, and then further extend that, and we're going to work with our partners. 2 partners I didn't mention in the slide is actually 2 psychology professors. They are in the behavioral science department at the Air Force Academy. So we will, in summary, leverage what Bonnie has already done, because she knows how to work with DoD exactly, and then we go from there.
So much. We are at time. This concludes the presentation portion of today's event. I just want to take a moment to thank our partners, Dr. Sutherland and all of her colleagues at UC2, as well as those folks at US Cybercom, and everyone who helped make today's event a success. Thank you to those who presented their innovative solutions. It was wonderful to hear everything you had to say and more about your technologies. I wanted to encourage everyone to go check out the Expo Hall, which can be found on the broadcast link that you're currently on. In the top left corner, you'll be able to learn more about the teams who presented today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this Monday, and have a great rest of your day.